Are you ready to fall asleep with 100 interesting facts from growing up in 1950's America? Let's begin. 1. Suburban neighborhoods and the growth of Levittown. During the 1950s, suburban neighborhoods transformed American living through developments like Levittown. Built by William Levitt, these mass-produced communities offered affordable homes to returning World War II veterans and young families. Levittown pioneered assembly line construction methods, creating thousands of similar houses with modern amenities like built-in appliances and television sets. White picket fences, manicured lawns, and tree-lined streets became symbols of post-war prosperity. These suburbs fostered tight-knit communities where neighbors knew each other, children played freely outside, and the American dream felt tangible. Levittown's success sparked nationwide suburban expansion, fundamentally reshaping how Americans lived. 2. Baby boom, families, and larger households. The 1950s witnessed unprecedented family growth as the baby boom generation arrived. Households averaged 3 to 4 children, filling homes with energy and noise. Parents embraced traditional roles. Fathers commuted to work while mothers managed domestic life. Living rooms buzzed with activity as siblings played board games, watched television together, and shared family meals. Larger families necessitated station wagons, bigger refrigerators, and bulk purchasing. Neighborhoods overflowed with children, riding bicycles, playing baseball, and organizing impromptu street games. This era celebrated family togetherness, with parents prioritizing stability and normalcy after wartime uncertainty. The baby boom fundamentally influenced American culture for generations. 3. Price of groceries and everyday goods in the 1950s. Grocery shopping during the 1950s was remarkably affordable compared to modern standards. A gallon of milk cost approximately 21 cents, bread was 14 cents per loaf, and eggs averaged 60 cents per dozen. Families could purchase a pound of coffee for 85 cents or ground beef for 45 cents. A new car ranged from $1,600 to $2,000, while gasoline was just 18 cents per gallon. Movie tickets cost 50 cents, and a first-class postage stamp was 3 cents. These prices reflected post-war economic prosperity and stable inflation, allowing single-income families to live comfortably and save money. 4. Drive-in theaters as social hubs. Drive-in theaters became quintessential 1950s entertainment destinations, combining movies with automobile culture. Families packed station wagons with children in pajamas, pillows, and homemade snacks, enjoying films under starlit skies. Teenagers made drive-ins their courting territory, providing privacy unavailable elsewhere. Speakers hooked onto car windows delivered audio while massive outdoor screens displayed Hollywood's latest releases. Concession stands offered popcorn, hot dogs, and sodas during intermissions. At their peak, over 4,000 drive-ins operated nationwide, representing freedom, leisure, and modern convenience. These outdoor theaters fostered community connections while celebrating America's love affair with automobiles and entertainment. 5. Soda fountains and diners as teen hangouts. Soda fountains and diners served as primary teenage gathering spots throughout the 1950s. After school, adolescents congregated at chrome-trimmed counters, ordering cherry cokes, milkshakes, and banana splits for minimal cost. Jukeboxes played Elvis Presley, Chuck Berry, and Buddy Holly, while teens socialized, flirted, and danced. These establishments offered independence from parental supervision within safe, public environments. Waitresses knew regular customers by name, and booths hosted homework sessions, first dates, and friendship bonds. The soda fountain culture embodied innocent teenage rebellion and carefree youth, creating lasting memories and establishing social rituals that defined the decade's adolescent experience. 6. First, shopping malls. Appearing in suburban America, the 1950s introduced revolutionary shopping malls to suburban landscapes. Southdale Center, opening in 1956 in Minnesota, became America's first fully enclosed, climate-controlled mall. These complexes consolidated multiple stores under one roof, offering convenient, weather-protected shopping experiences. Families spent entire afternoons browsing department stores, specialty shops, and enjoying communal dining areas. Malls became social destinations beyond mere retail, featuring fountains, benches, and gathering spaces. Parking lots accommodated hundreds of automobiles, reflecting car-dependent suburban lifestyles. This innovation transformed American retail culture, shifting commerce from downtown districts to suburban centers and establishing shopping as leisure activity and family entertainment. 7. Telephone party lines and shared calls. Telephone party lines defined 1950s communication, with multiple households sharing single telephone lines. Neighbors could inadvertently or deliberately eavesdrop on conversations, creating both community connections and privacy concerns. Each household had distinctive ring patterns, 2 short rings, 1 long ring identifying intended call recipients. Telephone etiquette required limiting call duration and respecting others' urgent needs. Gossipy neighbors sometimes listened secretly, making party lines notorious for spreading news rapidly throughout communities. Despite privacy limitations, party lines made telephone service affordable for average families. Rotary dial phones in household kitchens or hallways became communication hubs, connecting families to extended relatives and friends. 8. Ice cream trucks in summer afternoons. Ice cream trucks epitomized 1950s childhood summers, announcing arrival with distinctive jingling bells and cheerful music. Children rushed from backyards clutching nickels and dimes, selecting frozen treats like popsicles, creamsicles, drumsticks, and ice cream sandwiches. These mobile vendors meandered through suburban neighborhoods during warm afternoons, creating daily anticipation. The ice cream truck represented freedom, simple pleasures, and community connection. Parents appreciated the convenience, while children treasured the ritual. Melting treats dripped onto hands and sidewalks as youngsters savored sweet moments together. This tradition embodied innocent childhood joys, neighborhood camaraderie, and the unhurried pace of summer days during post-war prosperity. 9. Housekeeping tools and the rise of convenience appliances. The 1950s revolutionized housekeeping through innovative convenience appliances that promised liberation from domestic drudgery. Automatic washing machines replaced laborious hand-scrubbing and wringer washers. Electric dryers eliminated clothesline dependency. Vacuum cleaners, mixers, toasters, and electric irons became standard household equipment. Television advertisements marketed these modern marvels to housewives, emphasizing time savings and effortless cleaning. Avocado green and turquoise-colored appliances added style to functional kitchens. Despite promises of leisure time, women often faced heightened cleanliness standards. Nevertheless, these appliances genuinely improved domestic efficiency, reflected post-war technological optimism, and established expectations for modern homemaking that persisted for decades. 10. Sunday family dinners and post-war traditions. Sunday family dinners represented sacred 1950s traditions, gathering extended families around dining tables laden with home-cooked meals. Mothers spent mornings preparing pot roasts, mashed potatoes, vegetables, and pies, while fathers read newspapers. After church services, relatives arrived for afternoon feasts lasting hours. Children wore their nicest clothes, practicing proper table manners under watchful parental eyes. Conversations covered neighborhood news, work accomplishments, and family updates. These weekly gatherings reinforced family bonds, transmitted values across generations, and provided stability after wartime disruption. Sunday dinners embodied gratitude, togetherness, and traditional values central to 1950s American life, creating cherished memories that participants remembered throughout their lives. 11. The launch of Disneyland in 1955. Disneyland opened its gates on July 17, 1955, in Anaheim, California, revolutionizing American entertainment. Walt Disney's visionary theme park transformed 19 acres into magical realms, including Fantasyland, Adventureland, Frontierland, and Tomorrowland. Opening day attracted thousands despite scorching heat, plumbing issues, and incomplete attractions. Families experienced innovative rides like the Jungle Cruise, Mad Tea Party, and Matterhorn bobsleds. Disneyland pioneered immersive storytelling through themed environments where fantasy became tangible reality. Television broadcasts brought the park into living rooms nationwide, inspiring family pilgrimages. Ticket books with A through E coupons regulated access to attractions. Disneyland embodied post-war optimism, technological progress, and childhood wonder, establishing the modern theme park industry. 12. I Love Lucy and the sitcom revolution. I Love Lucy premiered in 1951, transforming television comedy forever. Lucille Ball and Desi Arnaz created groundbreaking entertainment that attracted 40 million weekly viewers by mid-decade. The show pioneered multi-camera filming techniques before live studio audiences, establishing sitcom production standards. Lucy Ricardo's hilarious schemes, chocolate factory mishaps, Vitamita Vegamin commercials, and celebrity encounters became cultural touchstones. The series tackled real-life issues including pregnancy, which was revolutionary for 1950s television. Ricardo's interracial marriage reflected America's changing demographics. Reruns ensured I Love Lucy remained influential beyond its original run, proving television could deliver quality, repeatable entertainment. The show launched the modern sitcom format that dominates television today. 13. Rise of Rock and Roll with Elvis Presley. Elvis Presley ignited rock and roll revolution during the 1950s, transforming American music forever. His 1956 breakthrough with Heartbreak Hotel, Hound Dog, and Don't Be Cruel scandalized parents while electrifying teenagers. Elvis's hip-swiveling performances on The Ed Sullivan Show caused controversy, with cameras filming him only from waist up. His fusion of rhythm and blues, country and gospel created unprecedented sound. Teenage girls screamed hysterically at concerts, while conservative critics condemned rock and roll as dangerous and immoral. Elvis represented youthful rebellion, sexual energy, and racial integration through music. His influence extended beyond entertainment, challenging social norms and generational divides, establishing him as the king of rock and roll. 14. Ed Sullivan Show as a national stage. The Ed Sullivan Show became America's premier entertainment platform throughout the 1950s, broadcasting Sunday evenings to 70 million viewers. Sullivan's variety format showcased diverse acts, comedians, acrobats, opera singers, and rock musicians appealing to entire families. The show launched careers, making Elvis Presley's 1956 appearances legendary, despite censorship controversies. Sullivan introduced audiences to emerging talents while maintaining wholesome, family-friendly programming. His stiff presentation style contrasted with dynamic performers, creating endearing television moments. The show reflected American cultural diversity while establishing which entertainers achieved mainstream success. Appearing on Sullivan's stage signified arrival in American entertainment, making his approval career-defining. The program shaped popular culture, determining trends and validating new musical genres. 15. Drive-in movie theaters booming. Drive-in theaters exploded in popularity during the 1950s, with over 4,000 operating nationwide by decade's end. These outdoor venues combined America's automobile obsession with entertainment, offering families affordable evenings under stars. Parents appreciated bringing pajama-clad children without babysitter expenses. Double features, cartoons, and intermission snack bar visits created complete entertainment experiences. Teenagers transformed drive-ins into romantic destinations, enjoying privacy unavailable elsewhere. Massive screens dominated landscapes while tinny speakers hooked onto windows delivered audio. Concession stands sold popcorn, hot dogs, and sodas, contributing significantly to profits. Drive-ins represented freedom, modernity, and leisure, symbolizing prosperous post-war America, where entertainment and mobility merged seamlessly into beloved cultural institutions. 16. Hula hoops and other toy crazes. Hula hoops became the 1950s most explosive toy craze after launching in 1958. Wham-O manufactured millions of plastic hoops, selling 25 million within 4 months. Children and adults gyrated hips, attempting to keep hoops spinning as long as possible. Beyond hula hoops, other fads included frisbees, silly putty, and Mr. Potato Head. These simple toys provided inexpensive entertainment, encouraging outdoor physical activity. Toy crazes spread rapidly through neighborhoods as children demonstrated new acquisitions. Parents appreciated affordable diversions, keeping children active and engaged. Play-Doh, launched in 1956, offered creative sculpting opportunities. These toys reflected post-war prosperity, consumer culture, and childhood innocence, creating shared generational experiences and nostalgic memories. 17. The Mickey Mouse Club and children's television. The Mickey Mouse Club premiered in 1955, captivating young audiences with wholesome entertainment. The afternoon program featured talented Mouseketeers, including Annette Funicello, performing songs, skits, and educational segments. Children nationwide donned Mickey Mouse ears, singing the iconic theme song. The show pioneered merchandising opportunities, selling countless products bearing Disney characters. Daily themed episodes, Fun with Music Monday, Guest Star Tuesday provided structured variety. Educational content mixed seamlessly with entertainment, teaching values like friendship, honesty, and perseverance. The Mouseketeers became role models for baby boom children, representing clean-cut American youth. The show's success demonstrated television's power in shaping childhood experiences and establishing brand loyalty across generations. 18. Westerns, dominating television screens. Western television shows dominated 1950s programming, with over 30 series airing by decade's end. Gunsmoke, Bonanza, Rawhide, and Have Gun, Will Trust attracted massive audiences. These shows presented simplified morality tales, where heroes wore white hats and villains wore black. Cowboys embodied frontier values, independence, courage, and justice, resonating with post-war audiences. Families gathered weekly, watching sheriffs confront outlaws in dusty towns. Westerns offered escapism while reinforcing traditional American values and masculine ideals. The genre's popularity reflected nostalgia for simpler times and pioneer spirit. Merchandise, including toy guns, cowboy hats, and lunchboxes, capitalized on Western mania, making frontier mythology central to 1950s childhood. 19. Sock hops and school dances. Sock hops became quintessential 1950s teenage social events held in school gymnasiums. Students removed shoes to protect gymnasium floors, dancing in socks or stockings. Record players spun rock and roll hits while teenagers performed the hand jive, the stroll, and early twist variations. Chaperones monitored appropriate behavior while couples slow danced to ballads. These dances provided supervised socializing opportunities where teenage romance blossomed. Admission cost minimal change, making sock hops accessible entertainment. Girls wore poodle skirts and saddle shoes while boys sported slicked back hair and Letterman jackets. Sock hops embodied innocent teenage culture, fostering school spirit, peer bonding, and coming-of-age experiences that defined the decade's youth. 20. Comic books as cheap thrills. Comic books provided affordable entertainment throughout the 1950s, costing just 10 cents per issue. Superheroes like Superman, Batman, and Wonder Woman battled villains, while genres expanded to include romance, western, horror, and crime comics. Children traded issues, creating informal lending libraries. Concerns about comic books' influence sparked moral panic, leading to Senate hearings in 1954 investigating links to juvenile delinquency. The Comics Code Authority emerged, establishing content standards that sanitized storylines. Despite controversy, comics remained wildly popular, sold at drugstores, newsstands, and candy shops. Boys especially devoured adventure stories, while girls preferred romance comics. These publications fostered literacy, imagination, and collecting hobbies. 21. The spread of color television. Color television emerged during the 1950s, though widespread adoption came later. NBC broadcast the first coast-to-coast color program in 1954. However, color sets cost approximately $1,000, prohibitively expensive for average families. Black and white televisions dominated households throughout the decade. Networks gradually increased color programming, with Bonanza becoming the first weekly color series in 1959. Families visiting appliance stores marveled at vibrant color demonstrations. RCA aggressively marketed compatible color systems, eventually winning format wars. Early color televisions suffered from technical issues, including poor picture quality and frequent adjustments. Despite limitations, color television represented technological progress and future possibilities, exciting consumers about entertainment innovations, transforming American living rooms. 22. Polaroid cameras and instant photos. Polaroid cameras revolutionized photography during the 1950s with instant image development. Edwin Land's invention eliminated darkroom waiting, producing photographs within 60 seconds. The Polaroid Land camera model 95, introduced earlier but popularized throughout the 50s, cost approximately $72. Families captured birthdays, holidays, and vacations, immediately viewing results. This immediacy transformed photography from professional craft to accessible hobby. Party guests watched amazed as images materialized magically. Instant photos enabled creative experimentation without processing costs. Businesses used Polaroids for documentation and identification purposes. While expensive compared to traditional film, instant gratification justified costs for special occasions. Polaroid technology represented American innovation, convenience culture, and desire for immediate results. 23. Transistor radios and portable music. Transistor radios revolutionized music consumption during the mid-1950s, making entertainment truly portable. These pocket-sized devices, first marketed around 1954, replaced bulky vacuum tube radios. Teenagers especially embraced transistor radios, listening privately to rock and roll stations parents disapproved of. Priced initially at $50, costs decreased rapidly, making transistors accessible to youth. Beaches, parks, and bedrooms filled with music as individuals controlled their listening experiences. The technology enabled personal music consumption, fostering teenage independence and countercultural movements. Sony's transistor radios gained popularity, establishing Japanese electronics dominance. Transistor technology represented miniaturization trends, youth culture emergence, and shifting from communal to individual entertainment experiences. 24. Kitchen appliances like the electric blender. Electric blenders epitomized 1950s kitchen modernization, promising culinary convenience and sophistication. Waring blenders, popularized by bandleader Fred Waring, became standard wedding gifts. Housewives created milkshakes, smoothies, soups, and baby food effortlessly. Cookbooks featured blender-specific recipes, encouraging experimentation. Other appliances included electric mixers, toasters, can openers, and percolators. Colorful appliances in turquoise, pink, and yellow added style to functional kitchens. Advertising positioned appliances as liberating women from tedious kitchen labor. While appliances genuinely improved efficiency, they simultaneously raised cleanliness and cooking standards. The appliance boom reflected post-war prosperity, technological optimism, and consumer culture defining the decade. Modern kitchens became showcases for latest innovations. 25. Jet airplanes making travel more common. Commercial jet aviation emerged in the late 1950s, revolutionizing long-distance travel. Boeing 707 jets entered service in 1958, dramatically reducing transcontinental flight times. What previously required 12 hours now took approximately 6. Pan American Airways launched transatlantic jet service in 1958, making European vacations accessible to more Americans. Air travel transitioned from luxury reserved for wealthy to middle-class possibility. Airports expanded, accommodating growing passenger volumes. Jet travel represented technological achievement, global connectivity, and American innovation. Stewardesses became glamorous figures while pilots enjoyed prestige. Despite remaining expensive, jets democratized travel, shrinking the world and fostering international tourism. Aviation progress symbolized humanity's technological mastery and boundless optimism characterizing post-war America. 26. Early computers in government and business. Computers remained rare, expensive, and enormous during the 1950s, accessible primarily to government agencies, universities, and large corporations. UNIVAC 30, delivered to the Census Bureau in 1951, weighed 16,000 pounds and cost $1 million. These room-sized machines processed data using vacuum tubes and punch cards. IBM dominated business computing, producing mainframes for accounting, payroll, and inventory management. Programming required specialized knowledge, limiting computer access to trained professionals. Despite limitations, computers demonstrated revolutionary potential for data processing and scientific calculations. The 1950s laid groundwork for computing revolution, though personal computers remained decades away. These machines represented cutting-edge technology, inspiring science fiction visions of automated futures. 27. Record players and vinyl LPs. Record players became essential household fixtures during the 1950s as vinyl LP technology matured. Long-playing records, introduced in 1948, gained dominance throughout the decade. Families gathered around console stereos, furniture pieces housing record players, radios, and speakers. Teenagers purchased 45 RPM singles featuring rock and roll hits. Hi-fi enthusiasts invested in quality turntables, amplifiers, and speakers, pursuing optimal sound reproduction. Record collecting became a serious hobby, with listeners carefully handling discs and cleaning styluses. Album artwork and liner notes added visual appeal. Music stores offered listening booths for previewing purchases. Vinyl records enabled repeated listening, fostering deep musical appreciation. Record players democratized music access, transforming home entertainment and music industry economics. 28. The credit card revolution. Beginning. Credit cards emerged during the 1950s, fundamentally transforming American commerce. Diners Club, introduced in 1950, pioneered general-purpose charge cards. American Express followed in 1958 with its distinctive card. Bank of America launched Bank AmeriCard, later Visa, in 1958 in California. Initially, cards served business travelers and affluent consumers. Acceptance remained limited compared to cash, though participating merchants displayed window decals. Credit cards promised convenience, eliminating cash-carrying needs. However, interest rates and fees made credit expensive. The cards represented trust in consumers' repayment ability and growing acceptance of installment purchasing. Credit culture gradually replaced cash-based transactions, enabling consumer spending that fueled economic growth and establishing financial patterns persisting today. 29. Popular household cars like the Chevrolet Bel Air. The Chevrolet Bel Air epitomized 1950s automotive style and family transportation. Introduced in 1953, the Bel Air featured distinctive tail fins, chrome accents, and two-tone paint schemes. Families drove Bel Airs to church, drive-ins, and vacation destinations. The 1957 model became iconic with its dramatic styling and powerful V8 engine options. Other popular cars included Ford Fairlanes, Plymouth Belvederes, and Dodge Coronets. Station wagons accommodated growing baby boom families. Cars symbolized prosperity, freedom, and social status. Automobile ownership became nearly universal among middle-class families. Annual model changes encouraged frequent upgrades. Cars reflected optimism, engineering advancement, and American manufacturing dominance. The automobile transformed suburban lifestyles, making commuting and leisure travel routine. 30. Space race. Beginnings with Sputnik. 1957. The Soviet Union launched Sputnik 1 on October 4, 1957, initiating the space race and shocking Americans. This basketball-sized satellite orbited Earth every 96 minutes, transmitting radio signals audible to amateur operators. Sputnik challenged American technological superiority assumptions, creating national anxiety about falling behind Soviets. Congress responded by establishing NASA in 1958 and increasing science education funding. Schools emphasized mathematics and physics, preparing students for technological competition. Sputnik inspired science fiction enthusiasm, while raising fears about Soviet missile capabilities. The launch transformed space exploration from fantasy to reality, beginning superpower competition defining the Cold War. America's eventual determination to reach the moon originated from Sputnik's profound psychological impact. 31. Poodle skirts and saddle shoes. Poodle skirts became iconic 1950s teenage fashion, featuring colorful felt circle skirts appliqued with poodle designs. Teenage girls wore them to sock hops, school dances, and social events. These skirts paired perfectly with fitted sweaters, scarves tied around necks, and white bobby socks. Saddle shoes, two-toned leather Oxfords, completed the quintessential look. Girls sometimes wore multiple crinoline petticoats underneath, creating dramatic fullness. This fashion represented youthful femininity, innocence, and conformity to peer standards. Poodle skirts were affordable and often homemade, allowing personal creativity through different appliqué designs. The style embodied wholesome teenage culture, contrasting with emerging rebellious fashion trends. These garments remain nostalgic symbols of 1950s youth culture. 32. Leather jackets and greaser style. Leather jackets symbolized rebellious greaser subculture during the 1950s, challenging mainstream fashion norms. Working-class teenagers adopted black leather motorcycle jackets, blue jeans, white t-shirts, and slicked-back hair styled with pomade. This aesthetic drew inspiration from Marlon Brando in The Wild One and James Dean in Rebel Without a Cause. Greasers represented youthful defiance against conformist society and middle-class values. Their style emphasized toughness, masculinity, and working-class pride. Parents and authorities viewed greasers suspiciously, associating leather jackets with delinquency and danger. Despite or because of adult disapproval, greaser fashion attracted teenagers seeking identity outside mainstream culture. The style influenced subsequent youth movements and remains an iconic symbol of 1950s rebellion. 33. Crew cuts and short hairstyles for men. Crew cuts dominated 1950s men's hairstyles, reflecting military influence and conformist values. This short, tapered haircut required minimal maintenance, appealing to businessmen and students alike. Variations included flat tops and butch cuts. Men applied Brill cream or pomade for neat, controlled appearance. Professional men maintained conservative grooming standards, viewing long hair as inappropriate or effeminate. Barbers enjoyed steady business, as frequent trims maintained proper length. Crew cuts represented discipline, cleanliness, and mainstream masculinity. Deviations like Elvis Presley's pompadour challenged conventions, associating longer styles with rebellion. Military service influenced civilian grooming through discharged veterans, maintaining armed forces standards. Crew cuts embodied 1950s conformity, gradually challenged by emerging counterculture movements seeking individual expression. 34. Pearls and dresses for women. Pearls and dresses defined respectable 1950s women's fashion, emphasizing feminine elegance and propriety. Married women wore pearl necklaces, matching earrings, and conservative day dresses for errands, luncheons, and social obligations. Shirtwaist dresses, fitted bodices with full skirts, flattered figures, while maintaining modesty. Gloves, hats, and handbags completed ensembles. Television housewives like June Cleaver modeled idealized feminine presentation. Women dressed formally for activities modern sensibilities consider casual. Even housework required presentable appearance, since husbands might bring colleagues home unexpectedly. Fashion emphasized hourglass silhouettes, achieved through girdles and structured undergarments. This aesthetic represented traditional gender roles, domestic ideals, and middle-class aspirations, though increasingly challenged by women seeking greater freedoms and less restrictive clothing. 35. Letterman jackets for teenagers. Letterman jackets represented prestigious achievement in 1950s high schools, awarded to athletes and top students. These wool varsity jackets featured leather sleeves, school colors, and chenille letters, denoting sport or activity. Additional patches displayed accomplishments, championships, and participation years. Wearing Letterman jackets signified popularity, athletic prowess, and school pride. Girlfriends sometimes wore boyfriends' oversized jackets, publicly declaring romantic relationships. The jackets cost significant money, making them treasured possessions families purchased after earned eligibility. Letterman jackets fostered school spirit, competitive athletics, and hierarchical social structures. They represented teenage achievement systems, peer recognition, and coming-of-age milestones. These jackets remain nostalgic symbols of high school glory days and 1950s youth culture. 36. Davy Crockett hats and coonskin caps. Davy Crockett mania swept 1950s America, following Disney's television series premiere in 1954. Children everywhere demanded coonskin caps, fur hats with raccoon tails imitating frontier hero Davy Crockett. Disney merchandised aggressively, selling millions of caps alongside lunchboxes, toy rifles, and other frontier-themed products. The Ballad of Davy Crockett became hit song children sang endlessly. The craze demonstrated television's marketing power and children's influence on family purchasing. Coonskin caps cost approximately $2.95, making them accessible to most families. The phenomenon lasted approximately 2 years before fading. Davy Crockett fever exemplified 1950s consumer culture, media-driven fads, and childhood fascination with American frontier mythology and heroic adventure narratives. 37. Hoop skirts and crinoline petticoats. Crinoline petticoats created fashionable full-skirted silhouettes throughout the 1950s. Women and girls wore multiple stiff petticoats underneath circle skirts and dresses, achieving dramatic bell shapes. Crinolines made from horsehair, nylon, or stiffened fabric required careful washing and starching to maintain shape. Getting through doorways and sitting required practice navigating voluminous skirts. This fashion emphasized feminine curves while maintaining modesty through substantial fabric coverage. Petticoats ranged from inexpensive to elaborate, depending on quality and decoration. The style complemented tiny cinched waists, creating exaggerated hourglass figures. Fashion magazines provided styling advice while mothers taught daughters proper petticoat care. Full skirts represented feminine ideals, though increasingly impractical for active lifestyles, eventually yielding to simpler, streamlined fashions. 38. High school dress codes. Strict dress codes governed 1950s high schools, enforcing conservative standards reflecting adult authority and social conformity. Girls wore dresses or skirts extending below knees. Pants were absolutely prohibited. Boys required collared shirts tucked into trousers. Jeans were unacceptable. Administrators measured skirt lengths and sent violators home for wardrobe changes. Schools banned certain hairstyles, makeup, and jewelry considered inappropriate or distracting. Dress codes aimed to minimize social class differences and maintain serious educational atmospheres. Violations resulted in detention, suspension, or parent conferences. Students largely complied. Understanding rules reinforced respect for authority and institutional standards. These regulations reflected broader societal expectations about appropriate adolescent behavior, gradually challenged as youth culture asserted independence and rejected restrictive conventions. 39. Church clothes versus casual wear. 1950s Americans maintained distinct wardrobes for church versus casual activities, reflecting respect for religious institutions. Sunday mornings required Sunday best. Men wore suits, ties, and polished shoes, while women donned dressy outfits, hats, gloves, and heels. Children dressed formally in miniature adult styles. Church attendance was social obligation and community participation beyond religious observance. Casual wear worn for yard work, errands, or relaxation contrasted sharply with formal church attire. Women wore house dresses or simple skirts, while men wore khakis or casual trousers. The distinction demonstrated respect, propriety, and social consciousness. Dressing appropriately reflected personal character and family values. These clothing divisions reinforced social hierarchies, religious importance, and behavioral expectations governing 1950s community life. 40. Rise of department store catalogs. Department store catalogs became essential shopping tools throughout the 1950s, especially for suburban and rural families lacking nearby retail access. Sears, Roebuck, and Montgomery Ward published massive catalogs, hundreds of pages featuring clothing, appliances, furniture, tools, and toys. Families spent evenings browsing, circling desired items before placing mail orders. Catalogs democratized access to consumer goods unavailable locally. Christmas catalogs arrived in autumn, allowing children to dream about presents. The wish book tradition became family ritual. Catalog shopping offered convenience, though purchasing without examining merchandise firsthand involved risk. Return policies accommodated dissatisfied customers. These catalogs reflected expanding consumer culture, mail-order commerce, and American retail innovation. They connected isolated communities to mainstream consumer markets, transforming shopping habits. 41. Baby boom classrooms. With overcrowding, baby boom children flooded 1950s schools, creating severe overcrowding and resource shortages. Classrooms designed for 25 students accommodated 40 or more. Schools implemented double sessions, some students attending morning shifts, others afternoons. Portable classrooms and temporary buildings supplemented inadequate permanent facilities. Teachers managed overwhelming student loads with limited supplies. Communities passed bond measures, financing new school construction, though building couldn't match enrollment growth. Despite challenges, teachers maintained educational standards through dedication and discipline. Overcrowding fostered competitive academic environments and strong peer socialization. The crisis demonstrated baby boom's unexpected societal impacts, forcing educational system adaptation. These experiences shaped an entire generation's schooling, emphasizing conformity, discipline, and collective experience over individualized attention. 42. School milk programs. School milk programs became standard in 1950s elementary schools, providing daily nutrition and supporting dairy industry. Glass bottles or small cartons accompanied lunch or arrived mid-morning as snacks. Milk cost approximately 2 cents, subsidized by government agricultural programs. Children inserted straws into cartons, though spills were common. Chocolate milk offered special treat alternative to plain white milk. Programs aimed to ensure adequate childhood nutrition during growth years. Some students monitored refrigerated milk storage, delivering crates to classrooms. Teachers enforced milk consumption, believing dairy essential for healthy development. These programs reflected post-war emphasis on children's welfare, government agricultural support, and communal responsibility for young people's health. School milk remains nostalgic memory for baby boomers. 43. Chalkboards and cursive lessons. Chalkboards dominated 1950s classrooms as primary teaching tools before modern technology. Teachers wrote lessons in neat cursive while students copied into notebooks. Chalk dust filled air, causing sneezes and coating clothing. Students earned privileges erasing boards and clapping erasers outdoors, removing accumulated chalk. Cursive handwriting received serious instructional emphasis, with students practicing perfect penmanship daily. Palmer method or Zanna-Bloser techniques taught standardized letter formation. Teachers believed cursive developed discipline, fine motor skills, and academic seriousness. Penmanship grades appeared on report cards. Inkwells and fountain pens prepared students for adult communication, requiring legible handwriting. These lessons reflected educational values, emphasizing mastery of fundamental skills, uniformity, and preparation for professional life, demanding clear written communication. 44. Popular 1950s school lunches. School lunches during the 1950s emphasized hearty, economical meals reflecting American comfort food traditions. Cafeterias served hot lunches, including meatloaf, mashed potatoes, green beans, dinner rolls, and canned fruit cocktail. Sloppy joes, macaroni and cheese, fish sticks, and beef stew appeared regularly. Lunches cost approximately 25 cents. The National School Lunch Program, established in 1946, expanded throughout the 50s, providing subsidized meals, ensuring children received adequate nutrition. Lunch ladies served generous portions from steam tables. Students ate at long tables in noisy cafeterias. Some children brought lunch boxes featuring popular characters. Chocolate or plain milk accompanied meals. School lunches fostered community, provided consistent nutrition, and reflected government commitment to children's welfare during post-war prosperity. 45. Teen slang and phrases. 1950s teenagers developed distinctive slang, differentiating themselves from adults while building peer group identity. Cool, hip, and groovy described approval, while square or drag indicated disapproval. Going steady meant exclusive dating relationships, often symbolized by exchanged class rings or Letterman jackets. Daddy-o addressed friends informally, while Passion Pit referenced drive-in theaters. Cruising meant driving aimlessly for socializing. Far out expressed amazement. Adults struggled, understanding teenage vocabulary, creating generational communication barriers. Slang evolved rapidly, with terms gaining and losing popularity quickly. This linguistic creativity reflected youth culture's growing independence, rock and roll influence, and teenagers' desire establishing distinct identities separate from parent generation. Teen slang became cultural marker of belonging and youthful rebellion. 46. School sports and cheerleading. School sports dominated 1950s extracurricular activities, with football, basketball, and baseball attracting community-wide support. Friday night football games became social events where entire towns gathered. Student athletes enjoyed celebrity status, wearing Letterman jackets signifying achievement. Cheerleading squads performed coordinated routines, leading crowd enthusiasm with megaphones and pom-poms. Cheerleaders exclusively female represented school spirit, popularity, and feminine ideals. Tryouts were competitive, with selected girls gaining prestigious social positions. Cheerleading required athleticism despite being viewed primarily as support role for male athletes. Pep rallies before big games fostered school unity. Sports programs taught teamwork, discipline, and competition, while providing entertainment for communities. Athletic success brought school pride and scholarships for exceptional players. 47. Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts. Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts thrived during the 1950s, teaching children outdoor skills, citizenship, and moral values. Scouts wore distinctive uniforms, earned merit badges for accomplishments, and participated in camping trips, jamborees, and community service projects. Boy Scouts learned wilderness survival, first aid, and leadership through structured rank advancement. Girl Scouts sold cookies, developed homemaking skills, and practiced civic responsibility. Scouting emphasized patriotism, religious faith, and character development. Troops met weekly in churches, schools, or community centers. Parents volunteered as troop leaders, fostering intergenerational mentorship. Scouting provided structured activities promoting wholesome values, outdoor appreciation, and leadership skills. Programs reflected post-war emphasis on youth development, community involvement, and preparation for responsible adult citizenship. 48. Report cards and strict grading. Report cards arrived quarterly in 1950s schools, generating anxiety and anticipation among students. Teachers assigned letter grades A through F with strict standards and limited grade inflation. Failing grades resulted in parent conferences and potential retention. Report cards included conduct and effort marks, assessing behavior alongside academics. Teachers wrote comments describing student performance and attitude. Parents signed cards, acknowledging receipt and awareness of academic standing. Poor grades resulted in punishment, restricted privileges, extra study time, or corporal discipline. Academic achievement was emphasized strongly, with education viewed as privilege requiring serious effort. Social promotion was rare. Students repeated grades if unprepared. Report cards represented accountability, parental authority, and educational rigor, characterizing 1950s schooling, when academic standards remained high and excuses few. 49. PTA meetings in community schools. Parent-teacher associations thrived during the 1950s, connecting schools with communities through regular meetings and volunteer activities. Mothers especially participated actively, organizing fundraisers, chaperoning field trips, and supporting classroom needs. PTA meetings addressed school policies, curriculum concerns, and community issues. These gatherings fostered collaboration between educators and families, ensuring children received comprehensive support. Schools served as community centers, hosting events, meetings, and celebrations beyond academic functions. Parents knew teachers personally, maintaining open communication about children's progress and behavior. This involvement reflected shared responsibility for child rearing and education. Communities took collective pride in local schools, passing tax levies and supporting programs. PTAs represented community cohesion, parental engagement, and collaborative approach to childhood development characterizing post-war American society. 50. Drive-in burger joints after football games. Drive-in burger joints became essential teenage gathering spots following 1950s Friday night football games. Restaurants like A&W, Sonic, and local establishments offered curbside service where car hops delivered food to parked vehicles. Students cruised slowly through parking lots, socializing from car windows while consuming burgers, fries, and milkshakes costing under $1. Winners celebrated victories, while others processed defeats. These hangouts provided unsupervised socializing within safe, public environments. Jukeboxes and neon lights created festive atmospheres. Drive-ins merged automobile culture with teenage independence, offering spaces where youth controlled their social experiences. The tradition strengthened school spirit, peer bonds, and community connection, while celebrating American prosperity, automobile freedom, and carefree adolescence defining the era. 51. Cost of a new car in 1955. The cost of purchasing a new automobile in 1955 represented a significant but achievable investment for middle-class American families experiencing post-war prosperity. The average new car price ranged from approximately $1,800 to $2,500, depending on make, model, and optional features. The iconic Chevrolet Bel Air, one of the decade's most popular vehicles, retailed for around $2,100 in its base configuration. Ford's Fairlane offered comparable pricing, while luxury brands like Cadillac commanded premium prices exceeding $4,000. Plymouth, Dodge, and other manufacturers competed aggressively for market share, offering competitive pricing and innovative features, including automatic transmissions, power steering, and radio entertainment systems. When contextualized against average annual incomes approximately $4,000 for typical households, a new car represented roughly half a year's earnings. However, the introduction of automobile financing made ownership accessible to families who couldn't afford full cash purchases. Dealerships offered installment payment plans, typically requiring down payments of 10 to 20%, with monthly payments spread over 24 to 36 months. Interest rates on auto loans averaged approximately 8 to 12% annually, adding considerable cost but making immediate ownership possible. Optional equipment significantly increased purchase prices. Air conditioning, still relatively rare, added approximately $400. Upgraded interior fabrics, white wall tires, two-tone paint schemes, and enhanced chrome trim packages each commanded premium pricing. Power windows and seats represented luxury features reserved for higher-end models. Radio installation cost an additional $60 to $100, though increasingly became standard equipment as the decade progressed. The automobile market during 1955 was intensely competitive, with manufacturers introducing annual model changes to stimulate consumer interest and encourage frequent upgrades. Advertising emphasized style, power, and modern convenience, appealing to status-conscious buyers. Tail fins grew increasingly dramatic, chrome became more elaborate, and horsepower ratings climbed steadily. The 1955 model year is now considered a golden era of American automotive design, with vehicles from this period highly valued by collectors. Trade-in values for older vehicles helped offset new car costs, with dealerships offering allowances that reduced effective purchase prices. Many families maintained vehicles for only 3 to 5 years before trading for newer models, creating robust used car markets. Used vehicles from the late 1940s and early 1950s sold for $500 to $1,000, providing affordable transportation for families unable to purchase new. Regional pricing variations existed, with cars typically costing more in isolated areas lacking dealer competition. Urban markets featured numerous dealerships competing aggressively through pricing, financing terms, and added incentives. End-of-model year clearance sales offered substantial discounts as dealers cleared inventory for incoming models. The affordability of automobiles during the 1950s fundamentally shaped American society, enabling suburban expansion, family mobility, and car-dependent lifestyles. Single-income households could reasonably afford reliable transportation, supporting commuting patterns where fathers drove to work while mothers managed household responsibilities and children's activities. The automobile represented freedom, status, and participation in American prosperity, making car ownership nearly universal among middle-class families and establishing transportation patterns that defined subsequent decades of American life and culture. 52. Price of gas. Compared to wages, gasoline prices during the 1950s remained remarkably low by contemporary standards, averaging approximately 18 to 25 cents per gallon throughout the decade. This pricing reflected abundant domestic petroleum production, limited environmental regulations, minimal taxation, and absence of international supply disruptions that would later characterize energy markets. Gas stations competed vigorously for customers through pricing, service quality, and promotional giveaways, including drinking glasses, trading stamps, and other incentives. Full-service pumping, where attendants filled tanks, checked oil, cleaned windshields, and inspected tire pressure, was standard practice, included in the per-gallon price without additional charges. When examined relative to wages, gasoline represented an exceptionally affordable commodity, accessible to virtually all automobile owners. The federal minimum wage in 1955 stood at 75 cents per hour, meaning a single hour of minimum wage work purchased approximately 3 to 4 gallons of gasoline. Average workers earning substantially more than minimum wage, typically $1.50 to $2 hourly, could purchase significantly more fuel with equivalent labor time. A typical 8-hour workday at average wages could purchase 40 to 60 gallons, enough to fuel a vehicle for weeks, given the era's driving patterns. Professional and managerial employees earning $5,000 to $8,000 annually, roughly $2.50 to $4 hourly, found fuel costs virtually negligible in household budgets. Even families taking extended vacation road trips consuming hundreds of gallons spent relatively modest amounts. A cross-country journey from New York to California, requiring approximately 150 gallons, cost only $30 to $40 in fuel, less than a week's wages for average workers. The affordability of gasoline profoundly influenced American lifestyle choices and urban development patterns. Suburban expansion accelerated as commuting costs remained minimal, allowing families to live considerable distances from employment centers without excessive transportation expenses. The daily commute, consuming 2 to 3 gallons weekly, represented trivial portions of household budgets. This economic reality encouraged automobile dependency, discouraged public transportation development, and established low-density suburban sprawl as the dominant development pattern. Gasoline taxation remained minimal during the 1950s, with combined federal and state taxes typically adding only 5 to 7 cents per gallon. These taxes funded highway construction through dedicated infrastructure funds, most notably supporting the interstate highway system authorized by the Federal Aid Highway Act of 1956. Politicians recognized that affordable gasoline and modern highways were politically popular and economically beneficial, encouraging policies supporting these objectives. Fuel efficiency rarely concerned 1950s consumers, as gasoline prices didn't justify prioritizing economy over performance, size, or style. Vehicles averaging 12 to 18 miles per gallon were standard, with large V8 engines consuming fuel liberally. Consumers accepted this inefficiency because fuel costs remained manageable. The concept of fuel economy as significant purchasing criterion emerged only decades later, when prices increased substantially. Regional price variations existed, but remained modest, with rural areas sometimes paying slightly more due to transportation costs, while urban markets featured competitive pricing. Independent stations occasionally undercut major brands by several cents per gallon, though most consumers patronized familiar brands like Shell, Texaco, Esso, or Gulf, trusting quality and service over minimal savings. The relationship between fuel prices and wages during the 1950s created transportation freedom unprecedented in human history. Average families could afford unlimited mobility, transforming American society, enabling tourism industries, supporting suburban development, and establishing automobile-centered culture. This affordability contributed to the decade's optimistic spirit and sense of boundless possibility, though it also established unsustainable patterns regarding energy consumption and urban planning that created challenges in subsequent decades. 53. Average home costs in suburban neighborhoods. Average home costs in 1950s suburban neighborhoods reflected the post-war housing boom that transformed American residential patterns and made homeownership accessible to unprecedented numbers of middle-class families. Suburban homes typically ranged from $7,000 to $15,000, depending on location, size, and amenities, with modest starter homes in developments like Levittown available for as little as $7,900. These prices represented roughly 2 to 3 times average annual household incomes, approximately $4,000 to $5,000, making homeownership achievable for families with stable employment and modest savings. Levittown developments pioneered mass-production housing techniques that dramatically reduced construction costs while maintaining quality standards acceptable to buyers. William Levitt's revolutionary approach applied assembly line principles to home building, with specialized crews performing specific tasks as they moved through developments. This efficiency enabled Levitt to offer complete homes including appliances, landscaping, and modern amenities at prices significantly below traditional construction costs. The basic Cape Cod-style Levittown home featured 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, living room, kitchen, and unfinished expandable attic, built on 60 by 100-foot lots in planned communities with schools, shopping centers, and recreational facilities. Larger suburban homes with 3 or 4 bedrooms, multiple bathrooms, attached garages, and premium locations commanded $12,000 to $18,000. Custom-built homes in prestigious neighborhoods reached $25,000 to $40,000, though these remained exceptional rather than typical. Regional variations significantly affected pricing, with homes in rapidly growing areas like California and Florida sometimes exceeding these averages, while properties in declining industrial regions or rural areas sold for less. Mortgage financing made homeownership accessible despite substantial purchase prices. Veterans Administration (VA) loans, authorized under the GI Bill, offered eligible veterans zero down payment mortgages with favorable interest rates typically ranging from 4 to 5%. Federal Housing Administration (FHA) loans required minimal down payments, often 10%, with competitive rates and extended terms. Conventional mortgages through banks and savings and loan associations typically required 20 to 25% down payments, but remained accessible to families with adequate savings and creditworthiness. 30-year mortgages became standard during this period, replacing shorter-term loans common in earlier decades. This extended amortization reduced monthly payments to manageable levels, often $75 to $150 monthly for typical suburban homes, comparable to or less than rental costs. The tax deductibility of mortgage interest provided additional financial incentive, effectively subsidizing homeownership through reduced tax obligations. Monthly housing costs, including mortgage payments, property taxes, insurance, and utilities, typically consumed 25 to 35% of household incomes, substantial but manageable proportions for families with stable earnings. Single-income households where fathers worked while mothers managed homes and children could generally afford home ownership, establishing this arrangement as the idealized middle-class lifestyle. Suburban home construction emphasized modern conveniences previously considered luxuries. Most new homes included complete bathroom facilities, modern kitchens with built-in cabinets and appliances, forced air heating systems, electrical service adequate for television and appliances, and telephone wiring. Many featured innovative materials like vinyl flooring, acoustic ceiling tiles, and aluminum windows. Attached garages accommodated the automobiles essential to suburban living, while modest yards provided outdoor space for children and gardening. The affordability of suburban homes reshaped American society profoundly. Home ownership rates climbed dramatically, reaching approximately 60% by decade's end, unprecedented levels representing fundamental shift from rental to owner-occupied housing. This transformation created wealth-building opportunities for middle-class families, as property values appreciated, provided stable communities for raising children, and established suburban lifestyle as the American ideal, patterns persisting throughout subsequent generations despite evolving economic conditions and housing market dynamics. 54. Minimum wage and allowance for teens. The federal minimum wage during the 1950s stood at 75 cents per hour, from 1950 through 1956, when it increased to $1 per hour. These rates represented the legal floor for covered employment, though actual wages varied considerably based on occupation, region, skill level, and industry. While seemingly minimal by contemporary standards, minimum wage earnings provided meaningful income when contextualized against 1950s prices and living costs. Full-time minimum wage employment 40 hours weekly generated $30 weekly, or approximately $125 monthly, sufficient to cover basic necessities, though insufficient for comfortable middle-class living. Minimum wage jobs typically employed young workers, part-time employees, and individuals in service industries, including retail, food service, and agricultural work. Teenage workers often earned minimum wage in first jobs at soda fountains, movie theaters, grocery stores, gas stations, and restaurants. These positions provided spending money, work experience, and lessons in responsibility, punctuality, and customer service. Many teenagers worked after school and weekends, earning $15 to $25 weekly, substantial amounts for discretionary spending on clothes, entertainment, dates, and automobile expenses. Teenage allowances supplemented or replaced employment income, with practices varying considerably among families. Typical allowances range from $1 to $5 weekly, depending on family affluence, age, and assigned responsibilities. Younger children might receive 25 to 50 cents weekly for basic chores like making beds, clearing dishes, or taking out trash. Teenagers earned larger allowances, $2 to $5, particularly if assigned substantial household responsibilities, or if parents discouraged outside employment to prioritize studies. Allowance philosophies varied widely among parents. Some families provided allowances unconditionally as children's share of family resources, teaching financial management without tying funds to specific tasks. Others conditioned allowances on completing assigned chores, establishing work-reward relationships. Still others provided minimal allowances, encouraging teenagers to seek employment for discretionary income. These approaches reflected broader values about childhood, work ethic, and financial responsibility. Teenage spending priorities included entertainment, movies, records, concerts, clothing, cosmetics, and social activities like dates to drive-in restaurants, roller rinks, or bowling alleys. Boys spent money on automobiles, fuel, insurance, modifications if fortunate enough to own vehicles. Girls purchased makeup, fashion accessories, and beauty supplies. Both genders bought records, transistor radios, and other consumer electronics. Many teenagers saved portions of earnings or allowances for larger purchases or future needs, including college, though the savings rate varied considerably. The relationship between minimum wage and teenage financial independence was significant. Teenagers could earn meaningful income through part-time employment, fostering independence while remaining dependent on families for housing, food, and major expenses. This semi-independence characterized adolescence during this era, allowing teenagers to participate in consumer culture and establish adult financial habits while maintaining family support systems. Gender disparities existed in both employment opportunities and compensation. Boys more easily found higher-paying jobs in gas stations, grocery stores, and labor positions, while girls typically worked in lower-paying retail, restaurant, and babysitting positions. This reflected broader societal gender roles and discrimination that limited women's economic opportunities regardless of age. The purchasing power of teenage earnings and allowances was substantial relative to contemporary dollars. A teenager, earning $5 weekly through allowance or part-time work, could attend movies, 50 cents, purchase records, 98¢, buy multiple comic books, 10 cents each, and still save money. This economic reality enabled robust teenage consumer culture, making youth a recognized market segment and allowing teenagers meaningful participation in commercial life. Minimum wage and teenage financial arrangements during the 1950s reflected broader economic conditions, low inflation, stable prices, strong employment that provided security and opportunity. These arrangements taught financial responsibility, work ethic, and consumer behavior while allowing teenagers to enjoy adolescence without crushing economic pressures. The system worked reasonably well within the context of sustained prosperity and stable family structures, though it existed within discriminatory systems that limited opportunities for minorities and women, issues that would increasingly demand attention in subsequent decades. 55. Candy bar prices. Candy bars during the 1950s represented affordable indulgences accessible to children and adults alike, with standard-sized bars typically costing 5 cents throughout most of the decade. This nickel pricing remained remarkably stable, reflecting low inflation and manufacturers' commitment to maintaining price points familiar to consumers. Popular brands including Hershey's chocolate bars, Three Musketeers, Milky Way, Snickers, Baby Ruth, Butterfinger, and countless others line drugstore, grocery store, and gas station counters in colorful wrappers designed to attract attention and stimulate impulse purchases. The 5-cent candy bar became such an iconic price point that manufacturers resisted increases even as production costs rose, instead, occasionally reducing bar size to maintain pricing rather than alienate cost-conscious customers. The affordability of candy bars made them accessible to children, receiving modest allowances or earning small amounts through chores. A child with a weekly allowance of 50 cents could purchase 10 candy bars and still have money remaining for other treats or savings. This accessibility created strong childhood attachment to particular brands, with manufacturers understanding that developing brand loyalty among young consumers would generate decades of future purchases. Candy companies invested heavily in advertising targeting children, sponsoring television programs, offering promotional giveaways, and creating memorable mascots and jingles that embedded brands into popular consciousness. Penny candy offered even more economical options for children with limited funds. Candy stores and drug stores featured glass cases and jars, filled with various confections, jawbreakers, licorice whips, wax lips, candy buttons on paper strips, Mary Janes, root beer barrels, and numerous other varieties sold individually for 1 penny each. Children with nickels made agonizing decisions about whether to purchase a single full-sized candy bar or 5 pieces of penny candy, maximizing quantity or choosing preferred brands. These decisions represented early lessons in consumer choice, budgeting, and deferred gratification. Candy bars served multiple social functions beyond simple confectionery consumption. They represented affordable gifts children could give friends or family using their limited resources. Sharing candy bars established social bonds and demonstrated generosity among peers. Boys sometimes purchased candy for girls as modest romantic gestures during early dating experiences. Candy represented rewards parents provided for good behavior, academic achievement, or completed chores, creating positive reinforcement systems. Vending machines dispensed candy bars in public spaces including schools, offices, train stations, and recreational facilities, offering convenient access to sweet treats. These machines typically charged 5 cents, though some premium or larger bars cost 10 cents. The mechanical operation of vending machines, inserting coins, pulling knobs, hearing candy drop into retrieval bins, fascinated children and adults alike, representing modern convenience and automated retailing. Regional candy preferences varied, with certain brands dominating particular geographic areas. New England preferred specific varieties less popular in southern states, while Western markets embraced different options. Local candy manufacturers produced regional favorites unavailable nationally, creating geographic candy cultures and traditions. Traveling families sometimes purchased unfamiliar local candies as inexpensive souvenirs or novelty items, discovering new flavors unavailable in home markets. Seasonal candies created excitement around holidays. Halloween candy miniature bars sold in large bags enabled homeowners to provide trick-or-treaters with name-brand sweets rather than homemade treats or fruit. Easter brought chocolate eggs and bunnies. Christmas featured candy canes and specialty gift boxes. Valentine's Day emphasized heart-shaped boxes and conversation hearts. These seasonal variations expanded candy's cultural significance beyond everyday snacking to holiday celebration and gift-giving traditions. Candy bar prices reflected broader economic stability, characterizing the 1950s. Low inflation, efficient production, stable ingredient costs, and competitive markets combined to maintain affordable pricing that benefited consumers while sustaining profitable industries. Candy companies employed thousands in manufacturing, distribution, and retail, contributing to post-war economic prosperity. The 5-cent candy bar became a nostalgic symbol of the decade's affordability and innocence, representing a time when children's pocket change purchased. Genuine enjoyment and simple pleasures remained accessible to all, regardless of family economic circumstances, creating shared experiences across social classes and establishing confectionery preferences that lasted lifetimes. 56. Movie ticket prices. Movie ticket prices during the 1950s ranged from approximately 25 cents for children's matinee showings to 75 cents for adult evening admissions at first-run theaters, with typical adult prices averaging 50 to 60 cents for standard screenings. These prices represented affordable entertainment accessible to families and individuals across economic classes, contributing to cinema's role as America's dominant mass entertainment medium before television ownership became universal. Regional variations existed, with large urban theaters in major cities like New York, Chicago, and Los Angeles charging premium prices, sometimes reaching $1 or more for reserved seating at prestigious venues, showing blockbuster releases or special roadshow presentations with intermissions and program books. The pricing structure reflected exhibition practices where theaters offered multiple daily showings, with matinee performances typically before 5 p.m., priced lower to attract families, children, and senior citizens during otherwise slow periods. Evening performances commanded higher prices, appealing to adults and dating couples seeking entertainment after dinner. Weekend showings, particularly Saturday nights, represented peak attendance periods when theaters charged maximum prices. Some theaters offered discount days, typically Tuesdays or Wednesdays, reducing admission by 10 to 15 cents to stimulate attendance during traditionally slow periods. Children's ticket prices, usually 25 to 35 cents, made moviegoing accessible to young audiences using allowance money or birthday gifts. Saturday matinees became weekly rituals, where parents dropped children at theaters for several hours of entertainment, including cartoons, serial adventures, newsreels, and feature films. For 50 cents, children enjoyed complete entertainment packages lasting 3 to 4 hours, providing safe, supervised activities while parents managed errands or enjoyed free time. These matinees fostered childhood independence, social interaction with peers, and developing cinematic literacy and preferences. Drive-in theaters offered alternative pricing structures, typically charging per car rather than per person, usually $1 to $1.50 per vehicle, making them economical for families with multiple children. Some drive-ins charged modest per-person fees but still remained affordable alternatives to traditional indoor theaters. Drive-ins featured double features, allowing patrons to watch 2 films for single admission prices, enhancing perceived value. The ability to bring children in pajamas, prepare homemade snacks, and enjoy privacy made drive-ins particularly attractive to young families managing tight budgets. When compared to average wages, approximately $1 to $2 hourly for typical workers, movie tickets represented 1/2 to 1 hour's earnings, making them affordable even for minimum wage workers. Middle-class families earning higher incomes found movies extremely accessible, easily affording regular attendance without budget strain. A couple's movie date, including tickets and refreshments, cost approximately $2 to $3 less than half a day's wages for average workers, making cinema dating popular among teenagers and young adults. Concession prices added to total moviegoing costs but remained relatively affordable. Popcorn cost 10 to 25 cents depending on size, sodas ranged from 10 to 20 cents, and candy bars sold for 10 to 15 cents, modestly marked up from outside retail but still accessible. Some patrons smuggled outside snacks to avoid concession prices, though theaters discouraged this practice as concession sales generated crucial profits supplementing ticket revenue. The affordability of movies sustained Hollywood's golden age, ensuring large audiences for films across genres. Studios produced hundreds of films annually, knowing theaters needed constant content to attract regular patrons. The studio system's economic model depended on affordable ticket prices that encouraged frequent attendance, with theaters changing programs multiple times weekly to maintain audience interest. Many Americans attended movies weekly or more frequently, making cinema central to social life and cultural experience. Theater architecture and ambiance varied from modest neighborhood houses to elaborate movie palaces featuring ornate decoration, uniformed ushers, and luxurious seating. Premium theaters justified higher ticket prices through superior presentation, comfort, and prestige, while neighborhood theaters competed through lower prices and community convenience. This tiered system allowed diverse audiences to access cinema according to preferences and budgets. Movie ticket pricing during the 1950s reflected and reinforced cinema's democratic accessibility. Unlike many entertainment forms limited to affluent patrons, movies welcomed everyone regardless of economic status, creating shared cultural experiences across classes. This accessibility made films powerful cultural forces shaping values, fashion, language, and aspirations, establishing cinema as defining medium of 20th century American culture and creating nostalgic associations between affordable moviegoing and the decade's prosperity and optimism. 57. Average salaries for men and women. Average salaries during the 1950s reflected profound gender disparities rooted in discriminatory employment practices, social expectations, and legal frameworks that systematically disadvantaged women while privileging male workers. Men's average annual earnings range from approximately $3,500 to $5,000 for typical workers, with skilled tradesmen, professionals, and managers earning substantially more, $5,000 to $10,000 or higher. Factory workers in unionized industries like automotive manufacturing earned solid middle-class incomes, often $4,000 to $6,000 annually, with benefits including health insurance, pensions, and paid vacations. Professional occupations, doctors, lawyers, engineers, business executives, commanded significantly higher compensation, ranging from $8,000 to $20,000 or more, establishing comfortable upper-middle-class lifestyles. Women's average earnings told dramatically different stories, reflecting systematic discrimination, limiting opportunities, and compensation. Women employed full-time earned approximately 60 to 65% of men's wages for comparable work, a wage gap rooted in explicit discrimination rather than neutral market forces. Women's average annual earnings ranged from $2,000 to $3,000, with many occupations effectively closed to female workers regardless of qualifications. Teaching, nursing, secretarial work, and retail positions dominated women's employment options, while higher-paying skilled trades, management positions, and professional occupations remained largely male, preserves defended through formal barriers and informal discrimination. The 1950s employment landscape was characterized by explicit gender segregation, considered normal and legally permissible. Help-wanted advertisements appeared under separate men and women sections, with higher-paying positions listed exclusively under men's categories. Employers openly stated preferences for male workers, particularly for management and professional roles, without legal consequences. Women routinely faced questions about marriage and family plans during interviews, with employers refusing to hire or promote women likely to marry or become pregnant, viewing female workers as temporary and unreliable regardless of individual circumstances or commitment. Married women faced particularly severe discrimination, with many employers maintaining explicit policies against hiring or retaining married female workers. The assumption that married women's primary responsibilities centered on households and families justified excluding them from career opportunities. Approximately one-third of women worked outside homes during the 1950s, a proportion that would grow substantially in subsequent decades. But married women's workforce participation remained controversial. Society pressured women to leave employment upon marriage, with continued work sometimes interpreted as husbands' financial inadequacy or failure to fulfill breadwinner roles. Professional women faced especially steep barriers. Female lawyers, doctors, engineers, and business executives remained exceptionally rare, encountering discrimination from employers, colleagues, clients, and customers. Professional schools limited female admissions through quotas, while professional associations sometimes excluded women entirely. Those who persisted faced isolation, skepticism, and compensation significantly below male colleagues, despite equivalent credentials and performance. Teaching and nursing offered primary professional opportunities for educated women, though even these fields maintained gendered hierarchies with men disproportionately occupying leadership positions. The salary disparities had profound implications for women's economic security and independence. Lower earnings limited women's ability to live independently, purchase property, accumulate savings, or achieve financial security without marriage. This economic dependence reinforced traditional gender roles and limited women's choices regarding relationships, family planning, and life direction. Divorced or widowed women often faced severe economic hardship, given limited employment opportunities and inadequate compensation. African American workers, both male and female, faced additional discrimination compounding gender-based barriers. Black men earned substantially less than white male counterparts, while black women facing both racial and gender discrimination occupied the economy's lowest rungs with extremely limited opportunities and minimal compensation. Domestic service employed large proportions of black women, with wages often below minimum wage and without benefits or legal protections. Union membership provided some workers, predominantly men in industrial sectors, with enhanced wages, benefits, and job security through collective bargaining. However, many unions explicitly excluded women and minorities, or relegated them to separate locals with inferior contracts. Union discrimination reinforced broader labor market inequality, limiting opportunities for workers facing systemic barriers. The 1950s salary structure reflected broader social values, prioritizing male breadwinners, supporting dependent wives and children. The idealized family arrangement promoted through media, government policy, and cultural institutions. Tax policies, social security benefits, and employment practices all reinforced single-income household models, where men earned family wages while women managed domestic responsibilities. This arrangement worked adequately for families conforming to ideals, but created hardship for single women, female household heads, and families departing from traditional structures. These salary patterns and employment practices would face increasing challenges as civil rights and women's movements gained momentum, ultimately producing legal reforms, including the Equal Pay Act of 1963 and Title VII of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, prohibiting employment discrimination. However, during the 1950s, gender-based salary disparities remained legal, socially accepted, and deeply embedded in economic structures, creating systematic inequality, affecting millions of women and families, while limiting national economic potential through underutilizing half the population's talents and capabilities. 58. Cost of a TV set. Television sets during the 1950s represented significant household investments, with prices ranging from approximately $150 for basic tabletop models to $700 or more for elaborate console units featuring larger screens and integrated furniture styling. These costs represented substantial portions of family budgets, roughly equivalent to 3 to 6 weeks of average earnings, making television purchases important financial decisions, requiring careful consideration and often installment financing. Despite high costs, television ownership expanded dramatically throughout the decade, with penetration rates climbing from approximately 9% of households in 1950 to nearly 90% by 1960, representing one of the most rapid technology adoptions in history. The television market during the 1950s featured numerous manufacturers competing aggressively for market share. Major brands including RCA, Zenith, Admiral, Philco, Motorola, General Electric, and Westinghouse offered various models targeting different consumer segments and price points. RCA, as the industry pioneer and technology leader, typically commanded premium prices, while other manufacturers competed through lower pricing, extended warranties, or innovative features. Retail competition was intense, with department stores, appliance dealers, furniture stores, and discount retailers all selling televisions, creating pricing pressure benefiting consumers. Television technology evolved rapidly throughout the decade, affecting pricing and purchasing decisions. Early 1950s models featured relatively small screens, 10 to 14 inches, measured diagonally, and black and white picture tubes prone to quality issues and requiring frequent service. As manufacturing improved, screen sizes increased, picture quality enhanced, and reliability improved, justifying continued purchases even among households owning older sets. By late decade, 17-inch and 21-inch screens became standard, with some premium models offering 24-inch or larger displays. Color television technology, introduced mid-decade, remained extremely expensive, typically $700 to $1,000, limiting adoption to affluent early adopters, with color ownership remaining below 5% of households through decade's end. Console televisions, floor-standing cabinets, often featuring doors concealing screens when not viewing, represented furniture as much as electronics, These units incorporated period styling including blonde wood finishes, modern lines, or traditional cabinetry, matching living room decor. Consoles ranged from $400 to $700 depending on size, features, and furniture quality. Many families positioned consoles as living room focal points, replacing pianos or phonographs as entertainment centers and status symbols demonstrating prosperity and modernity. Tabletop or portable televisions offered more economical alternatives, priced from $150 to $300 depending on screen size and features. These units sat on tables or stands, offering flexibility in placement and lower initial costs, appealing to budget-conscious families or those purchasing second sets for bedrooms or kitchens. Truly portable televisions with carrying handles remained rare and expensive until transistor technology matured, though some compact models marketed portability despite substantial weight. Financing options made television ownership accessible, despite high costs. Retailers offered installment plans requiring modest down payments, typically 10 to 20%, with monthly payments spread over 12 to 24 months. Interest charges added to total costs, but immediate ownership without full payment appeals to families unable to save entire purchase amounts. Some retailers advertised no money down promotions, though these typically involved higher interest rates or prices. The cultural pressure to own televisions, both for family entertainment and social status, motivated families to accept financing terms they might not consider for other purchases. Ongoing costs beyond purchase prices included antenna installation, typically $50 to $150 for rooftop antennas, providing optimal reception and periodic repairs, addressing vacuum tube failures, adjustment needs, and component wear. Television repair technicians became fixtures in neighborhoods, making house calls to diagnose and fix issues. Many families purchased service contracts providing regular maintenance and repairs for annual fees, offering peace of mind against unexpected expenses. The decision to purchase television represented more than acquiring entertainment technology. It signified participation in modernity and mainstream American culture. Families without televisions increasingly felt socially isolated as neighbors, co-workers, and friends discussed programs they hadn't seen. Children pleaded for televisions, enabling participation in peer conversations about popular shows. The social pressure to own television sets motivated purchases families might otherwise defer, creating consumer debt some struggled to manage. Television's value proposition extended beyond entertainment cost comparisons. One television purchase provided years of free programming networks funded through advertising rather than viewer fees, offering movies, comedy, drama, news, sports, and children's programming accessible without ongoing subscription costs beyond electricity. Compared to regular movie attendance, live performances, or other entertainment requiring per-use payment, television's essentially unlimited content justified high initial costs through ongoing value. The television industry's growth created substantial employment manufacturing sets, producing programming, selling advertising, and servicing equipment. This economic activity contributed to 1950's prosperity, creating well-paying jobs and generating corporate profits that supported continued innovation. Television advertising revolutionized marketing, providing unprecedented reach, enabling national brands and stimulating consumer culture. By decade's end, television ownership had become nearly universal among middle-class families and increasingly common among working-class households, transforming American culture, politics, and social life. The high initial costs proved temporary barriers rather than permanent obstacles, as financing, falling prices, and technological improvements, combined with intense desire for television's social and entertainment benefits, to drive adoption rates exceeding even optimistic predictions, establishing television as the 20th century's defining medium. 59. Cost of common appliances. Common household appliances during the 1950s ranged dramatically in cost, depending on type, features, and brand, with basic models often accessible to middle-class families, while premium versions represented significant investments. Automatic washing machines, perhaps the most desired labor-saving appliance, typically cost $200 to $350 for standard models, with deluxe versions featuring multiple cycles, automatic dispensers, and advanced features reaching $500. Wringer washers. Older technology, requiring manual intervention, sold for less, approximately $100 to $175, though automatic machines rapidly displaced these as preferred options. Electric clothes, dryers, increasingly paired with automatic washers, cost approximately $200 to $300, though many families initially continued line drying to avoid this expense. Refrigerators represented essential appliances in 1950s homes, replacing iceboxes that required regular ice deliveries. Basic models with approximately 8 to 10 cubic feet of storage cost $200 to $300, while larger units with 12 cubic feet or more, featuring separate freezer compartments and automatic defrosting, ranged from $350 to $500. Freezer capacity was particularly valued, as families increasingly purchased frozen foods and appreciated long-term food storage. Some affluent families purchased separate chest freezers, costing $300 to $400, enabling bulk food purchases and storage of garden produce. Electric ranges transformed cooking from coal, wood, or gas stoves to clean, convenient appliances with precise temperature controls. Basic 4-burner electric ranges cost approximately $200 to $300, while models featuring self-cleaning ovens, griddles, and modern styling reached $400 to $550. Gas ranges remained popular in regions with natural gas access, typically priced slightly lower than comparable electric models. Some luxury homes installed wall ovens and separate cooktops, representing premium kitchen design that commanded corresponding premium prices. Smaller appliances offered more accessible entry into modern convenience. Electric toasters ranged from $15 to $35 depending on features and capacity. Coffee percolators cost $12 to $28. Electric mixers essential for baking enthusiasts ranged from $25 to $60 depending on power and attachments. Vacuum cleaners, available in upright and canister styles, cost $50 to $125, with premium brands like Hoover and Electrolux commanding higher prices. Electric irons ranged from $12 to $25, with steam irons representing modern conveniences worth premium pricing. Dishwashers remained luxury appliances during the 1950s, with ownership limited to affluent households. Built-in models cost approximately $300 to $500 plus installation expenses, while portable models on wheels ranged from $250 to $375. High costs and the perception that hand washing was adequate limited dishwasher adoption compared to other appliances, though ownership grew steadily throughout the decade as prices gradually declined and consumer awareness increased. Television sets, discussed separately, represented another major appliance purchase, while radio combinations with record players created entertainment centers ranging from $150 to $400 depending on audio quality and furniture styling. High-fidelity enthusiasts invested in separate components, turntables, amplifiers, speakers, with complete systems, reaching $1,000 or more for top-quality equipment. Air conditioning remained rare in private homes during the 1950s, with window units costing $300 to $600, prohibitively expensive for most families. Central air conditioning systems required thousands of dollars for equipment and installation, limiting them to new construction in affluent subdivisions or commercial buildings. Most families relied on electric fans costing $20 to $40 for summer cooling, accepting heat as unavoidable rather than investing in expensive air conditioning. 60. Inflation. Compared to later decades, the 1950s experienced remarkably low and stable inflation compared to turbulent economic periods that would follow in subsequent decades. Annual inflation rates typically remained below 2% throughout most of the decade, with some years experiencing virtually no price increases or even modest deflation. This price stability contrasted sharply with the 1970s and early 1980s, when inflation reached double digits, devastating household budgets and creating economic chaos. The 1950s stable prices reflected multiple favorable factors, including abundant domestic resources, limited international competition, strong dollar dominance, balanced federal budgets, and Federal Reserve policies prioritizing price stability over competing objectives. Consumer price stability meant families could confidently plan long-term budgets, knowing costs would remain predictable. A loaf of bread costing 14 cents in 1950 cost approximately 18 cents by 1960, modest increase over a full decade. Gasoline prices remained essentially flat. Housing costs increased moderately, but predictably, supporting home ownership aspirations. Wages grew faster than prices, generating real income gains that improved living standards throughout the decade. This positive wage-price relationship enabled single-income families to achieve middle-class lifestyles, purchase homes and automobiles, and save for futures without inflation eroding purchasing power. The low-inflation environment fostered economic confidence, encouraging investment, entrepreneurship, and consumer spending. Businesses could price products reliably without frequent adjustments. Workers negotiated wage increases, representing real gains rather than merely keeping pace with rising costs. Savers earned positive real returns on bank deposits and bonds. Retirees on fixed incomes maintained purchasing power without seeing inflation devastate retirement security. Several factors contributed to this stability. Post-World War II industrial capacity provided abundant production capability, meeting consumer demand without supply constraints driving prices upward. Agricultural productivity generated plentiful, affordable food. Domestic petroleum and mineral resources limited energy costs. Limited government spending and relatively balanced budgets avoided deficit-driven inflation. The Bretton Woods international monetary system anchored currencies to gold-backed dollars, constraining monetary expansion. Union wage demands remained moderate by later standards, avoiding wage price spirals. This benign inflation environment would not persist. The 1960s brought gradually accelerating inflation as Vietnam War spending, expanding social programs, and looser monetary policies generated price pressures. The 1970s experienced stagflation, simultaneous high inflation and unemployment as oil embargoes, productivity slowdowns, and policy mistakes created economic conditions unimaginable during the 1950s. Inflation peaked above 13% in 1980, requiring severe Federal Reserve actions to restore price stability. The 1950s inflation experience shaped generational attitudes. Those who lived through this period remembered when prices remained stable, savings accumulated real value, and economic planning was straightforward. This nostalgia sometimes created unrealistic expectations about achieving similar stability in changed global economic conditions. However, the decade demonstrated that sustained low inflation was possible and beneficial, providing economic foundation, supporting broadly shared prosperity, and establishing baseline against which subsequent inflationary periods appeared particularly damaging and disruptive. 61. Eisenhower's presidency. Dwight David Eisenhower served as the 34th President of the United States from 1953 through 1961, bringing military leadership experience and moderate republicanism to an era of prosperity and Cold War tensions. Eisenhower, nicknamed Ike, won the 1952 presidential election decisively, defeating Democrat Adlai Stevenson with his tremendous popularity as Supreme Allied Commander during World War II. His campaign slogan, "I like Ike," captured public affection for the general-turned-politician who promised to end the Korean War and provide stable, experienced leadership during uncertain times. Eisenhower's presidency emphasized moderate conservatism, fiscal responsibility, and pragmatic governance rather than ideological extremism. He accepted and even expanded certain New Deal programs his Republican predecessors had opposed, recognizing their popularity and effectiveness. The interstate highway system, authorized through the Federal Aid Highway Act of 1956, represented his most visible domestic legacy. A massive infrastructure project justified through national defense arguments, but fundamentally transforming American transportation, commerce, and settlement patterns. Eisenhower supported balanced budgets, limiting federal spending and maintaining moderate tax policies that sustained post-war prosperity while avoiding excessive government growth. In foreign policy, Eisenhower navigated Cold War complexities with caution and restraint. He fulfilled his campaign promise by negotiating a Korean War armistice in July 1953, ending active combat, though leaving Korea divided. His new-look defense policy emphasized nuclear deterrence and air power over expensive conventional forces, containing costs while maintaining credible military strength. Eisenhower resisted pressure for aggressive intervention in various Cold War flashpoints, avoiding military entanglements that might escalate into nuclear confrontation. His famous farewell address in January 1961 warned against the military-industrial complex, expressing concern that defense contractors and military leaders might unduly influence policy toward excessive militarization. Civil rights presented challenges, Eisenhower addressed cautiously. While personally uncomfortable with racial integration and preferring gradual change, he enforced federal law when necessary. The Little Rock crisis in 1957 forced his hand when Arkansas Governor Orval Faubus defied federal court orders to integrate Central High School. Eisenhower federalized the Arkansas National Guard and deployed the 101st Airborne Division to protect 9 black students, integrating the school, establishing federal authority over state resistance. He signed the Civil Rights Act of 1957, the first such legislation since Reconstruction, though its provisions were modest and enforcement weak. Eisenhower suffered a serious heart attack in 1955, raising questions about his health and ability to serve. He recovered and won re-election in 1956 by even larger margins than his initial victory, demonstrating sustained public confidence despite health concerns. His genial personality, grandfather image, and evident decency appealed to Americans seeking stability after depression and war. Critics accused Eisenhower of insufficient leadership on civil rights, excessive caution in challenging McCarthyism, and prioritizing fiscal conservatism over addressing emerging social problems. Supporters praised his restraint in foreign policy, economic stewardship, maintaining prosperity, and moderate approach, avoiding extremism. Historical assessments have grown increasingly favorable, recognizing his subtle leadership style, achieved stability during potentially dangerous Cold War years, while managing economic prosperity and beginning necessary, if incomplete, progress toward racial justice. 62. Cold War fears and duck and cover drills. The Cold War between the United States and Soviet Union dominated the 1950s, generating pervasive anxiety about nuclear warfare that infiltrated daily life, particularly for children subjected to duck and cover drills in schools. The threat of atomic weapons created unprecedented fear. Unlike conventional warfare, nuclear attacks could annihilate cities instantly with no defense or warning. Soviet development of atomic weapons in 1949 and hydrogen bombs by 1953 created mutual destruction capability, fueling arms races and existential dread. Americans built backyard fallout shelters, stockpiled supplies, and practiced civil defense procedures of dubious effectiveness against nuclear annihilation. Duck and cover drills became routine in American schools, instructing children to hide under desks or crouch against walls, covering heads with arms when alarms sounded, supposedly protecting against nuclear blast effects. The famous civil defense film featuring Bert the Turtle taught children to duck and cover upon seeing nuclear flash, suggesting these simple actions might ensure survival. Modern observers recognize these drills' futility. Desks provided no meaningful protection against nuclear weapons, but they reflected desperate attempts to provide citizens some sense of control over uncontrollable threats while normalizing nuclear danger. The psychological impact on children who practice these drills remains debated. Some historians argue they traumatized young people, creating persistent anxiety about imminent nuclear war. Others suggest children treated drills as routine exercises, no more frightening than fire drills, failing to grasp implications. Many baby boomers recall duck and cover drills with mixed emotions, recognizing absurdity while remembering genuine fear that nuclear war might occur at any moment. The drills certainly conveyed that nuclear threat was real and present, requiring preparation even if actual protective value was minimal. Beyond schools, Cold War fears pervaded society. Air raid sirens tested regularly, creating opportunities for communities to practice evacuation procedures. Public buildings marked fallout shelters with distinctive yellow and black signs. Government pamphlets advised families on emergency preparations, food storage, and radiation protection. Popular culture reflected nuclear anxiety through science fiction films, featuring radiation-spawned monsters, apocalyptic narratives, and alien invasion metaphors representing communist threats. The phrase, "better dead than red," captured extreme anti-communist sentiment, justifying any measures preventing Soviet victory. Civil defense officials promoted family preparedness, encouraging backyard shelter construction. These underground or partially buried structures, stocked with canned food, water, medical supplies, and radiation detectors, cost thousands of dollars, but supposedly offered survival chances if nuclear war occurred. Shelter construction peaked following the 1962 Cuban Missile Crisis, though 1950s already saw substantial building. Ethical debates emerged about whether armed homeowners should prevent neighbors from entering private shelters during attacks. Grim calculations about survival in nuclear aftermath. The psychological burden of living under nuclear threat was significant. Adults worried about protecting children who might never reach adulthood if war occurred. Marriage and childbearing decisions sometimes factored in nuclear war possibilities. Some people developed fatalistic attitudes, believing nuclear war inevitable and living for present rather than planning futures. Others channeled anxiety into activism, joining peace movements advocating disarmament and negotiation. Cold War fears shaped politics, foreign policy, and domestic security measures. Anti-communist hysteria enabled McCarthyism and civil liberties violations. Defense spending absorbed massive federal resources. Educational priorities shifted towards science and mathematics. To compete with Soviet technological advances demonstrated through Sputnik, the space race emerged partly from Cold War competition for technological and ideological supremacy. Despite pervasive fear, daily life continued. People married, raised families, pursued careers, and built communities despite nuclear shadows. The duck and cover generation experienced childhood, marked by unique anxieties, but also unprecedented prosperity and opportunity, navigating tensions between optimism and dread that characterized the era. 63. The Korean War ending in 1953. The Korean War, lasting from June 1950 through July 1953, ended with an armistice, establishing a demilitarized zone near the 38th parallel, roughly where the conflict began, leaving Korea divided between communist North and non-communist South. The war's conclusion brought relief to Americans weary of casualties and costs, though the outcome, essentially a stalemate rather than decisive victory, generated frustration and debate about American military strategy and Cold War policy. The armistice, signed on July 27, 1953, technically remains in effect as no formal peace treaty ever ended the war, leaving the Korean peninsula in a state of suspended conflict, persisting into the 21st century. President Eisenhower, elected partly on promises to end the Korean conflict, fulfilled this commitment within months of inauguration. He visited Korea in December 1952 while president-elect, assessing the situation firsthand. Eisenhower's willingness to threaten nuclear weapon use against China, whether genuine threat or strategic bluff, may have pressured communist negotiators toward settlement. Stalin's death in March 1953 removed an obstacle to negotiations, with Soviet leadership reconsidering policies and encouraging Chinese and North Korean allies toward armistice. The war cost approximately 36,000 American lives, with over 100,000 wounded. South Korean military and civilian casualties exceeded 1 million, while North Korean and Chinese casualties may have reached millions, though exact figures remain uncertain. The devastation was extraordinary: cities destroyed, populations displaced, families separated. The war established patterns of limited conflict during the Cold War era, where superpowers avoided direct confrontation, risking nuclear escalation while fighting proxy wars in peripheral regions. The armistice created a demilitarized zone, DMZ, stretching approximately 150 miles across the peninsula, 2.5 miles wide, separating North and South Korea. This heavily fortified border became one of the world's most militarized regions, with massive troop concentrations and defensive positions facing each other across narrow space. The DMZ, paradoxically, became an unintended nature preserve, as decades without human disturbance allowed wildlife and vegetation to flourish within the dangerous no-man's land. American troops remained in South Korea after the armistice. Stationed there continuously into the present day, this military presence aimed to deter North Korean aggression and demonstrate American commitment to Allied defense. The war established precedent for open-ended American military deployments abroad without formal declarations of war, a pattern repeated in subsequent Cold War conflicts. The inconclusive outcome frustrated Americans accustomed to decisive World War II victories, contributing to debates about limited war strategies and whether unconditional victory should remain American military objectives. The Korean War received less attention than World War II or later Vietnam War, becoming a forgotten war despite its significance. Veterans returned to relatively little public recognition or fanfare, particularly compared to World War II heroes, or even later Vietnam veterans, who benefited from belated recognition. This neglect troubled Korean War veterans who felt their service and sacrifices were overlooked by a nation eager to move past unpleasant reminders of inconclusive conflict. The armistice's legacy included permanent Korean division, ongoing tensions periodically erupting into crises, and established Cold War dynamics that would govern international relations for decades. North Korea developed into one of the world's most repressive regimes under Kim Il-sung dynasty, while South Korea eventually transitioned from authoritarian rule to democracy and economic prosperity. The contrasting trajectories of North and South Korea illustrated ideological competition outcomes, with market democracies ultimately proving more successful than communist dictatorships, though this outcome required decades to become apparent and was hardly inevitable in 1953. 64. Civil rights movement beginnings. The 1950s witnessed the modern civil rights movement's emergence, challenging racial segregation and discrimination that had subjugated African Americans for generations. While the movement's most dramatic confrontations would occur during the 1960s, crucial foundations were laid during the previous decade through legal challenges, grassroots organizing, and courageous individual actions that began dismantling Jim Crow segregation's legal and social structures. The movement built upon earlier efforts, but gained momentum and visibility during the 1950s, setting the stage for transformative changes in American society. The Supreme Court's unanimous decision in Brown v. Board of Education on May 17, 1954, represented a watershed moment. Chief Justice Earl Warren's opinion declared that separate educational facilities are inherently unequal, overturning the 1896 Plessy v. Ferguson decision that had legitimized segregation for nearly 60 years. The ruling challenged legal foundations of segregation throughout Southern society, though implementation would prove difficult and violent. The court's 1955 follow-up decision ordered integration proceed with all deliberate speed, an ambiguous phrase allowing extensive delays and resistance. Rosa Parks' refusal to surrender her bus seat to a white passenger in Montgomery, Alabama, on December 1, 1955, sparked the Montgomery bus boycott, demonstrating organized resistance's power. Parks, an NAACP activist contrary to later myths depicting her as simply a tired seamstress, understood her arrest's potential significance. The boycott, lasting over a year, showcased emerging leaders including young Minister Martin Luther King Jr., who articulated nonviolent resistance philosophy that would guide the movement. The boycott's success, ending bus segregation in Montgomery, demonstrated that sustained community organization could achieve concrete victories against entrenched discrimination. The Little Rock Crisis of 1957 showcased resistance to integration and federal power's necessity in enforcing civil rights. When 9 black students attempted to integrate Little Rock Central High School per federal court orders, Arkansas Governor Orval Faubus deployed the National Guard to prevent entry. President Eisenhower, initially reluctant to intervene in civil rights struggles, ultimately federalized the Guard and sent the 101st Airborne Division to protect the students. The televised images of black teenagers facing violent mobs and requiring military escorts to attend school exposed segregation's brutality, shaming America internationally during Cold War ideological competition. Other significant events included Emmett Till's 1955 murder in Mississippi for allegedly offending a white woman, Till's mother's decision to hold an open-casket funeral, displaying her son's mutilated body, and Jet magazine's publication of graphic photographs shocked the nation, revealing racist violence's horrors. The acquittal of Till's murderers by an all-white jury demonstrated the justice system's complicity in racial oppression. The case galvanized activists and sympathizers, particularly in northern states where residents previously might have ignored southern racial conditions. The 1950s movement emphasized legal strategies pursued by organizations like the NAACP under Thurgood Marshall's leadership. These efforts challenged segregation through courts, slowly building precedents that would dismantle legal discrimination. Economic boycotts demonstrated black consumers' power, threatening businesses dependent on African American patronage. Churches provided organizational infrastructure, with ministers offering leadership, meeting spaces, and moral authority, supporting resistance. White resistance remained fierce. Citizens' councils, white-collar Klan, organized economic retaliation against civil rights activists. Violence against black citizens and white allies escalated. Southern politicians pledged massive resistance to integration, closing public schools rather than complying with desegregation orders. The Ku Klux Klan experienced resurgence, bombing churches and homes, murdering activists with impunity in communities where law enforcement officials often participated in or condoned violence. The 1950s laid groundwork for the 1960s' more dramatic confrontations. The movement established leadership, refined tactics, built coalitions, and achieved initial victories, proving change was possible. These developments inspired continued resistance and prepared activists for struggles ahead, demonstrating that ordinary people organizing for justice could challenge and ultimately overcome even deeply entrenched oppression, though the road ahead remained long and dangerous. 65. McCarthyism and the Red Scare. McCarthyism, named for Wisconsin Senator Joseph McCarthy, dominated early 1950s American politics, creating an atmosphere of paranoia, accusation, and repression targeting alleged communist infiltration of government, entertainment, education, and other institutions. McCarthy's February 1950 speech in Wheeling, West Virginia, claiming to possess lists of Communist State Department employees, launched his crusade despite never substantiating allegations. The resulting witch hunts destroyed careers, violated civil liberties, and created climate where accusation alone constituted evidence, with accused individuals facing blacklisting, unemployment, and social ostracism without due process protections. The Red Scare reflected genuine Cold War tensions combined with political opportunism and genuine paranoia. Soviet espionage was real. The Rosenberg case, involving Julius and Ethel Rosenberg's execution for passing atomic secrets to Soviets, demonstrated actual espionage threats. However, McCarthy and allies vastly exaggerated threats, fabricated evidence, and ruined innocent people's lives for political gain. McCarthy's tactics included unsubstantiated accusations, guilt by association, and public hearings designed to humiliate witnesses while providing no meaningful opportunity for defense or rebuttal. The House Un-American Activities Committee, HUAC, established before McCarthy's prominence, investigated suspected communists in Hollywood and other industries. The entertainment industry proved particularly vulnerable. Writers, directors, and actors accused of communist sympathies or refusing to testify faced blacklisting and formal industry-wide ban, preventing employment. The Hollywood 10, who refused to cooperate with HUAC investigations, citing First Amendment protections, received contempt citations and prison sentences. Hundreds more found careers destroyed based on past political associations, attendance at meetings, or alleged sympathies decades earlier during the Great Depression, when Communist Party membership was legal. McCarthy's power peaked during 1950 through 1954. His Senate investigations featured theatrical hearings, where accused individuals faced aggressive questioning broadcast on radio and emerging television. Many witnesses invoked Fifth Amendment protections against self-incrimination, but McCarthy and supporters treated this constitutional right as evidence of guilt, creating Fifth Amendment communists label that destroyed reputations. The atmosphere discouraged dissent, with people fearing that friendships, reading materials, or political views might trigger accusations. McCarthy's downfall began during the Army-McCarthy hearings in spring 1954, when he accused Army officials of harboring communists. The nationally televised hearings exposed McCarthy's bullying tactics and lack of evidence. Army Counsel Joseph Welch's famous rebuke, "Have you no sense of decency, sir?" after McCarthy attacked a young associate, captured growing public revulsion. The Senate censured McCarthy in December 1954 for conduct unbecoming a senator. His influence collapsed rapidly, and he died in May 1957, largely forgotten and discredited, though his name became permanent synonym for demagogic witch hunts. McCarthyism's damage extended beyond individuals whose lives were ruined. The movement chilled free speech, discouraged political engagement, promoted conformity, and weakened democratic institutions. Teachers avoided controversial subjects fearing accusations. Artists created safer, less politically challenging works. Labor unions purged leftist members, weakening organizing effectiveness. Universities required loyalty oaths, compromising academic freedom. The entertainment industry produced patriotic, anti-communist films while blacklisting talented creators. The Red Scare reflected deeper American anxieties about communism, rapid social change, and threats to traditional values. Nuclear fears, combined with ideological competition, made many Americans receptive to demagogues promising to root out internal enemies. The movement demonstrated how easily democratic societies could sacrifice civil liberties during perceived emergencies, and how political opportunists could exploit fear for personal advancement. McCarthy personally embodied these dangers, transforming legitimate security concerns into destructive crusade, destroying innocent lives while contributing nothing to genuine national security. The legacy of McCarthyism includes lasting skepticism toward accusations without evidence, understanding of civil liberties' fragility during crises, and recognition that political extremism threatens democratic values. The term witch hunt entered permanent political vocabulary, describing campaigns against alleged enemies based on ideology rather than evidence. Later generations learned from this era's mistakes, though debates continue about balancing security concerns with protecting freedom, demonstrating that tensions between liberty and security remain unresolved in American political life. 66. Suburban patriotism and civic pride. Suburban communities during the 1950s fostered intense patriotism and civic pride, creating tight-knit neighborhoods where residents actively participated in community organizations, celebrated national symbols, and expressed strong identification with American values and institutions. The suburbs represented the American dream, realized home ownership, safe neighborhoods, good schools, and prosperous families, generating gratitude and loyalty toward the nation, providing these opportunities. This patriotic sentiment manifested through flag displays, participation in civic organizations, support for schools and local government, and enthusiastic celebration of national holidays with parades, fireworks, and community gatherings reinforcing shared identity and values. Veterans organizations, including American Legion and Veterans of Foreign Wars chapters, thrived in suburban communities, providing spaces where former servicemen maintained camaraderie while promoting patriotic values and community service. These organizations sponsored youth programs, scholarship funds, baseball teams, and holiday celebrations. Memorial Day and Veterans Day featured solemn ceremonies honoring fallen soldiers, with substantial community participation, demonstrating respect for military service and sacrifice. World War II remained fresh memory, with many suburban fathers having served, creating personal connections to military traditions and national defense. Civic organizations, including Rotary clubs, Lions clubs, Kiwanis, and chambers of commerce, brought together business and professional men to promote community welfare while networking and socializing. These groups funded community projects, supported charitable causes, and fostered business development. Women's organizations, including junior leagues, garden clubs, and PTA chapters, provided parallel structures for female civic engagement. These overlapping organizational memberships created dense social networks, binding communities together while promoting civic responsibility and community improvement. Suburban communities invested heavily in public institutions, particularly schools. Residents proudly supported bond measures, funding new buildings, modern facilities, and quality programs. School events, concerts, plays, sporting events drew substantial attendance, with community members supporting young people even without personal connections. This collective investment reflected belief that strong schools benefited entire communities by educating future citizens and maintaining property values. Flag displays demonstrated patriotic sentiment. Homes flew American flags on holidays, with some maintaining daily displays. Schools conducted daily flag ceremonies with Pledge of Allegiance recitation. Public buildings, businesses, and organizations prominently displayed flags, creating visual reminders of national identity. The flag represented shared values: freedom, democracy, opportunity. Residents believed America uniquely embodied. Suburban civic pride sometimes manifested through competition between communities. Neighboring suburbs competed for recognition as having best schools, lowest crime, most attractive commercial districts, or strongest community spirit. Local newspapers promoted this civic boosterism, celebrating community achievements and encouraging resident participation in improvement efforts. This competitive pride motivated investment in public amenities and community institutions. The suburbs' patriotic culture had darker aspects. Conformity pressure discouraged dissent or non-traditional viewpoints. Suburban communities were overwhelmingly white, with racial covenants and discriminatory practices excluding minorities. This homogeneity created insular communities suspicious of outsiders and resistant to integration. The association of suburbia with real America implicitly criticized urban, ethnic, and minority communities as less authentically American, reinforcing problematic hierarchies and prejudices. Cold War tensions reinforced suburban patriotism. Communities built fallout shelters, conducted civil defense drills, and supported military preparedness. Anti-communist sentiment was intense, with suspicion toward political radicals or anyone questioning American exceptionalism. This ideological conformity limited debate and discouraged critical examination of national policies. Despite limitations, suburban civic engagement reflected genuine community spirit and resident commitment to collective welfare. People volunteered time and resources, improving communities, supporting neighbors, and building institutions serving future generations. This civic culture created strong communities where residents knew neighbors, participated in communal life, and felt responsibility for collective well-being. Patterns declining in later decades as individualism, mobility, and changing social structures weakened traditional community bonds. 67. Highway Act of 1956 building interstates. The Federal Aid Highway Act, signed by President Eisenhower on June 29, 1956, authorized constructing the interstate highway system, 41,000 miles of limited-access highways connecting American cities and regions. This massive infrastructure project, the largest public works undertaking in history, would require decades to complete and cost over $114 billion in original estimates, ultimately exceeding that substantially. The interstate system fundamentally transformed American geography, society, economy, and culture, enabling suburban expansion, stimulating economic growth, and establishing automobile-dependent development patterns dominating through the present. Eisenhower championed the project based on national defense arguments, as much as economic development or transportation efficiency. His World War II experience convinced him that modern warfare required rapid military mobility, with adequate highway infrastructure essential for national security. The interstate system's specifications required straight, wide lanes, capable of accommodating military vehicles and equipment, with overpasses designed for adequate clearance. In emergency, highways could serve as evacuation routes during nuclear attacks, or as runways for military aircraft, considerations reflecting Cold War defense planning. Beyond defense rationales, the interstate system promised substantial economic benefits. Improved transportation would reduce shipping costs, enhance commerce, stimulate economic development in connected regions, and create employment during construction. Rural areas particularly anticipated benefits from improved access to urban markets. The automobile and trucking industries strongly supported the program, recognizing that better highways would increase vehicle usage and sales while advantaging trucking over rail freight. The project's funding mechanism represented innovative federal-state partnership. The federal government would pay 90% of construction costs, with states contributing 10%. Funding came from Highway Trust Fund. Revenues generated through federal gasoline taxes, tire taxes, and other user fees, a pay-as-you-go system, where highway users directly financed construction through their consumption. This dedicated funding stream avoided general taxation, while ensuring resources for completing the massive project over decades. Construction began immediately, with early segments opening during late 1950s. The project would continue through 1991 when the system was declared essentially complete, though construction, expansion, and renovation continue indefinitely. Early construction focused on urban areas and critical intercity connections, gradually expanding to complete the comprehensive network. Construction techniques evolved over decades, with later segments incorporating environmental considerations, improved safety features, and updated engineering standards absent from earliest sections. The interstate system's impacts were profound and multifaceted. Suburban expansion accelerated dramatically as highways enabled workers to commute longer distances from employment centers. Cities sprawled outward along highway corridors, creating bedroom communities, shopping centers, and office parks in previously rural areas. Downtown urban districts declined as businesses and residents migrated to suburbs, draining cities of tax base and economic vitality. Highway construction sometimes destroyed established urban neighborhoods, particularly minority communities with less political power to resist route selections. Economic geography transformed. Cities located on interstate routes thrived while bypassed communities declined. Trucking displaced railroads as primary freight transportation, with economic implications for both industries and communities dependent on rail transportation. Tourism industries evolved around highway travel, with motor hotels, restaurants, and attractions serving automobile tourists, replacing rail-oriented hospitality infrastructure. Route 66 and other historic highways declined, as interstate routes provided faster alternatives, though some gained nostalgic appeal as relics of pre-interstate travel. The interstate system reinforced automobile dependency, making car ownership essential for accessing employment, shopping, and services in dispersed suburban landscapes. Public transportation declined, as low-density suburban development couldn't support viable bus or rail systems. This automobile dependency created challenges for non-drivers, poor, elderly, disabled, young people, limiting their mobility and economic opportunities. Environmental consequences included habitat fragmentation, increased pollution from vehicle emissions, urban sprawl consuming farmland and natural areas, and stormwater runoff from impervious pavement. These impacts weren't fully appreciated during the 1950s, when environmental concerns received minimal attention, though they would generate increasing controversy in subsequent decades. The Highway Act of 1956 represented federal government's largest infrastructure commitment, establishing precedent for federal involvement in transportation, while fundamentally reshaping American landscape and society in ways still reverberating today, demonstrating how infrastructure decisions create lasting consequences, extending far beyond original intentions. 68. School integration efforts. School integration efforts during the 1950s, triggered by the Brown v. Board of Education decision, represented early civil rights movement's most visible and contentious battleground. The Supreme Court's ruling that segregated schools were unconstitutional challenged entrenched Southern segregation while encountering fierce resistance from white Southerners, determined to maintain racial separation. Integration proceeded slowly and painfully, with most Southern schools remaining segregated throughout the 1950s, despite federal court orders. The struggle exposed deep racial hatred, tested federal authority limits, and demonstrated that legal victories alone couldn't overcome determined resistance without sustained enforcement and political will. The Brown decision generated immediate backlash across the South. Southern politicians issued the Southern Manifesto in March 1956, signed by 101 congressmen denouncing the decision as judicial overreach and pledging to resist implementation. State legislatures passed laws attempting to circumvent integration, including closing public schools rather than integrating, providing vouchers for private segregated academies, and revoking teaching licenses of educators supporting integration. Virginia adopted massive resistance policies, shutting entire school systems rather than allowing integration. The Little Rock Nine crisis in September 1957 showcased integration's difficulties. 9 black students selected to integrate Little Rock Central High School faced violent mobs threatening their safety. Arkansas Governor Orville Faubus deployed National Guard troops to prevent integration, defying federal court orders. President Eisenhower, initially reluctant to intervene, ultimately federalized the Guard and deployed the 101st Airborne Division to protect students and enforce federal law. The dramatic confrontation, broadcast nationally, exposed segregation's violence and federal authorities' necessity in enforcing civil rights. Even after troops ensured initial entry, the Little Rock Nine endured year-long harassment, physical attacks, and psychological abuse from white students and community members. Melba Patillo Beals later wrote about having acid thrown in her eyes, being pushed downstairs, and facing constant verbal abuse. Only one of the 9, Ernest Green, graduated from Central in 1958. Arkansas subsequently closed Little Rock public schools for the 1958 to 1959 academic year, rather than continue integration, demonstrating white resistance's extremism. Other Southern communities resisted through various tactics. Prince Edward County, Virginia, closed public schools from 1959 through 1964, establishing private segregated academies for white students, while black children received no public education. North Carolina and other states adopted freedom of choice plans theoretically, allowing students to attend any school but maintaining segregation through intimidation and bureaucratic obstacles, preventing black students from transferring to white schools. These evasions delayed meaningful integration for over a decade beyond Brown. Border states and some urban areas integrated with less confrontation, though rarely smoothly. Baltimore, Washington, D.C., and Kansas City integrated relatively peacefully, though facing resistance and white flight to suburbs, maintaining de facto segregation. Northern cities, while not maintaining legal segregation, practiced de facto segregation through residential patterns, gerrymandered attendance zones, and resource allocation favoring white schools. Northern liberals' criticism of Southern segregation often ignored their own region's racial problems. Integration efforts' slow pace frustrated civil rights activists who had hoped Brown would quickly end segregated schooling. By 1960, only token integration had occurred in most Southern states, with the vast majority of black students still attending segregated schools. Substantial integration would require additional legislation, particularly the Civil Rights Act of 1964, authorizing federal funding withdrawal from segregated schools and sustained federal enforcement over decades. The 1950s integration struggle revealed racial hatred's depths, while demonstrating that courageous individuals could challenge injustice despite enormous personal costs. Students, families, and supporters faced violence, economic retaliation, and social ostracism for pursuing educational equality. Their persistence laid groundwork for subsequent progress, while exposing the work remaining before achieving genuine educational equity and racial justice. 1969. NASA. Forming in 1958, the National Aeronautics and Space Administration, NASA, was established on July 29, 1958, consolidating American space efforts under civilian agency, responding to Soviet Union's stunning Sputnik launch the previous October. NASA's creation represented American determination to compete in the space race, channeling technological capabilities, scientific expertise, and national resources toward ambitious goals, including human spaceflight, satellite technology, and ultimately landing astronauts on the Moon. The agency transformed from hastily organized response to Soviet challenge into America's premier scientific and technological institution, achieving extraordinary accomplishments while capturing public imagination and demonstrating American innovation and determination. Sputnik's launch on October 4, 1957, shocked Americans who had assumed technological superiority over the Soviet Union. The basketball-sized satellite's radio signals, audible to amateur operators worldwide, provided undeniable evidence of Soviet space capability, while raising fears about military implications. If Soviets could launch satellites, they presumably could deliver nuclear weapons anywhere on Earth via intercontinental ballistic missiles. This perceived threat created urgency around developing American space capabilities, both for prestige and national security. President Eisenhower responded by proposing civilian space agency to coordinate fragmented American efforts previously divided among military services and research institutions. The National Aeronautics and Space Act passed Congress with broad bipartisan support, establishing NASA and charging it with peaceful space exploration, scientific research, and maintaining American leadership in aeronautics and space technology. The new agency absorbed the National Advisory Committee for Aeronautics, NACA, established in 1915, along with various military space programs, including the Army's Jet Propulsion Laboratory and Navy's Vanguard project. NASA's initial priorities included demonstrating American capability through visible achievements that would restore national prestige. Project Mercury, initiated before NASA's formal establishment but expanded under its direction, aimed to place American astronauts in orbit. The program would require developing spacecraft, life support systems, tracking networks, and operational procedures for human spaceflight challenges, requiring years to overcome. NASA selected 7 military test pilots as first astronauts, introduced to the public in April 1959 as American heroes embodying courage, skill, and pioneering spirit. Beyond human spaceflight, NASA pursued scientific missions including weather satellites, communications satellites, and planetary exploration. These practical applications demonstrated space technology's civilian benefits while advancing scientific knowledge. Project Explorer, America's first successful satellite launched in January 1958 before NASA's formal establishment, discovered the Van Allen radiation belts encircling Earth, demonstrating space exploration's scientific value. NASA's creation reflected broader Cold War competition, where technological achievement demonstrated ideological system superiority. Successfully launching satellites, sending astronauts to space, and eventually landing on the Moon would prove American free market capitalism's superiority over Soviet communism. Space achievement became proxy for overall national strength, making space program success a matter of vital national interest beyond scientific or practical considerations. The agency attracted talented scientists, engineers, and administrators who would accomplish extraordinary achievements during the 1960s, including the Mercury and Gemini programs, robotic missions to Moon, Mars, and Venus, and ultimately the Apollo moon landing program announced by President Kennedy in 1961. NASA's formation in the late 1950s established organizational structures, recruited personnel, developed technologies, and created operational procedures that would enable these later triumphs. NASA's establishment also stimulated educational initiatives. Concerns about falling behind Soviets in science and mathematics prompted massive federal investment in education through the National Defense Education Act of 1958. Schools emphasized science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, STEM subjects, encouraging students to pursue technical careers, supporting space exploration and national defense. This educational focus produced generations of scientists and engineers who would staff NASA and drive American technological innovation for decades. The space program captured public imagination in ways few government initiatives achieved. Americans followed space developments through extensive media coverage, with astronauts becoming national heroes and celebrities. Children aspired to become astronauts, scientists, or engineers. Science fiction's popularity soared as space exploration transformed from fantasy to imminent reality. NASA represented American optimism, technological prowess, and can-do spirit, embodying national character at its best. NASA's formation during the late 1950s marked the beginning of humanity's expansion beyond Earth, initiating an era of space exploration continuing into the present. The agency's creation demonstrated how Cold War competition, while dangerous in many respects, could also drive beneficial scientific and technological advancement. NASA's achievements would provide practical benefits including satellite communications, weather forecasting, GPS navigation, and countless technological spin-offs, while inspiring generations to pursue scientific careers and expanding human knowledge about the universe. The agency, established in 1958 as emergency response to Soviet challenge, evolved into enduring institution representing humanity's highest aspirations for exploration, discovery, and understanding. 70. The GI Bill shaping family life. The Servicemen's Readjustment Act of 1944, commonly known as the GI Bill, profoundly shaped 1950s family life by providing returning World War II veterans with unprecedented benefits, including education funding, home loans, unemployment compensation, and business loans. These benefits enabled millions of veterans to pursue higher education, purchase homes, and establish middle-class lives that would have been impossible without government support. The GI Bill created the modern middle class, facilitated suburban expansion, transformed higher education, and established family patterns defining the era. Its success demonstrated how targeted government programs could generate enormous social and economic returns while fulfilling moral obligations to veterans who had served during wartime. Educational benefits represented the GI Bill's most transformative component. The program paid full tuition plus living expenses for veterans attending college, vocational schools, or job training programs. Approximately 8 million veterans used educational benefits during the program's peak years from 1945 through 1956. This massive influx transformed American higher education from elite institutions, serving primarily wealthy families, to accessible pathway for working-class and middle-class students pursuing social mobility through education. Universities expanded dramatically, building dormitories, classrooms, and facilities, accommodating unprecedented enrollments. Many institutions initially established to serve veterans, including branches of state university systems, became permanent educational infrastructure, serving subsequent generations. Veterans who obtained college degrees through GI Bill benefits achieved substantially higher lifetime earnings than they would have otherwise, generating tax revenues far exceeding the program's costs. Engineers, teachers, doctors, lawyers, business executives, and other professionals who entered these fields through GI Bill-funded education contributed immeasurably to post-war prosperity and American economic dominance. The program demonstrated that investing in human capital through education generated exceptional returns both for individuals and society broadly. Home loan guarantees enabled veterans to purchase houses with zero down payment and favorable interest rates. This benefit fueled suburban expansion as veterans and their families moved to new developments like Levittown, offering affordable homes near employment centers. Veterans could purchase homes costing $7,000 to $12,000, with monthly mortgage payments comparable to or lower than rent, transforming renters into homeowners and creating wealth-building opportunities through home equity accumulation. Home ownership rates among veterans far exceeded those of non-veterans, creating economic security and stability, supporting family formation and child rearing. The GI Bill facilitated family formation by providing economic foundation for marriage and children. Veterans who might have delayed marriage due to economic uncertainty could marry confident they could support families through educational opportunities, leading to good jobs and home ownership, making family life comfortable. The resulting baby boom dramatically increased birth rates from 1946 through 1964, reflected this economic security and optimism about the future. GI Bill benefits enabled couples to have larger families than would have been financially feasible without government support, creating the demographic bulge that would influence American society for generations. The program promoted traditional family structures, where husbands worked while wives managed households and children. Educational and home loan benefits primarily went to male veterans, reinforcing gender roles despite many women having served during wartime, or worked in defense industries. Female veterans received similar benefits, but faced societal pressure to prioritize marriage and motherhood over careers or education. The GI Bill thus reinforced conventional 1950s gender dynamics while providing economic support that made single-income families viable. Business loans helped veterans establish small businesses, contributing to post-war economic expansion and entrepreneurship. Veterans opened stores, restaurants, service businesses, and manufacturing companies, creating employment and contributing to local economies. While this benefit received less attention than education and housing provisions, it supported economic dynamism and opportunity that characterized the era. The GI Bill had significant limitations and inequities. Southern states and discriminatory practices prevented many black veterans from receiving full benefits. Universities with segregation policies denied admission to black veterans, while discriminatory housing practices and racial covenants prevented them from purchasing homes in desirable neighborhoods. Veterans Administration officials sometimes steered black veterans toward vocational training rather than college education, limiting their opportunities. These racial disparities meant that while white veterans used GI Bill benefits to enter the middle class, many black veterans faced continued discrimination, limiting their advancement despite military service. Despite these serious flaws, the GI Bill represented remarkably successful social policy that transformed American society. The program demonstrated that government investment in citizens' education, housing, and economic opportunity could generate widespread prosperity while fulfilling obligations to veterans. The GI Bill's success influenced subsequent policy debates about government's role in promoting opportunity and shaped expectations that veterans deserved substantial support in recognition of their service. The program's impact on family life, enabling home ownership, supporting education, facilitating family formation, created the stable, prosperous middle-class families that characterized 1950s America and shaped the baby boom generation's experiences and opportunities. 71. Elvis Presley's first hits. Elvis Presley rose to fame in the mid-1950s as rock and roll's defining figure, blending rhythm and blues, country and gospel into a groundbreaking sound that captivated teenagers while alarming adults. Beginning at Sun Records under producer Sam Phillips, Elvis's early hits like That's All Right revealed his ability to cross musical and racial boundaries, leading to a landmark $35,000 RCA contract in 1955. His first RCA single, Heartbreak Hotel, 1956, became a national sensation, selling over 1 million copies and propelling him into the mainstream. Television appearances, especially on The Ed Sullivan Show, amplified both his popularity and controversy due to his provocative stage movements, which were often censored. Chart toppers, such as Hound Dog, Don't Be Cruel, and Jailhouse Rock, solidified his dominance. Beyond music, Elvis's films and rebellious image made him a cultural phenomenon, symbolizing youth autonomy, shifting sexual norms, and the power of popular culture in post-war America. 72. Chuck Berry and early rock guitar. Chuck Berry revolutionized rock and roll guitar during the 1950s with innovative techniques, memorable riffs, and energetic performances. His songs like Johnny B. Good, Maybelline, and Roll Over Beethoven featured distinctive double-string solos and driving rhythms that defined rock guitar vocabulary. Berry's clever lyrics captured teenage life, while his signature duck walk became an iconic stage move influencing countless musicians. 73. Doo-wop groups in street corners. Doo-wop groups harmonizing on street corners became quintessential 1950s urban culture, with young men creating vocal music using only their voices. Groups like the Platters, the Drifters, and neighborhood amateurs practiced under streetlights, in subway stations, and schoolyards. The accessible, a cappella style required no instruments, making music democratically available to working-class youth, creating beautiful harmonies together. 74. Rise of teenage record stores. Teenage record stores emerged during the 1950s as dedicated spaces catering to youth music tastes and culture. These shops sold 45 RPM singles, albums, and music magazines while providing listening booths where customers previewed records before purchasing. Store owners recognized teenagers as legitimate consumers with distinct preferences, creating welcoming environments where young people discovered music, socialized, and established youth-oriented commercial culture. 75. American Bandstand beginning. American Bandstand premiered nationally in 1957, hosted by Dick Clark, becoming television's most influential music program. The show featured teenagers dancing to current hits while artists performed, establishing national platform for rock and roll. Clark's clean-cut image made controversial music acceptable to mainstream audiences. The program launched careers, established dance crazes, and unified teenage culture coast to coast through shared viewing experiences. 76. Frank Sinatra's popularity. Frank Sinatra dominated 1950s popular music with sophisticated vocal interpretations and charismatic persona. His albums with Capitol Records, including Songs for Swingin' Lovers and Come Fly With Me, showcased mature artistry, appealing to adult audiences. Sinatra's film career, Rat Pack associations, and Las Vegas performances established him as entertainment icon, representing elegance, style, and cool masculinity that transcended generational divisions despite rock's emergence. 77. Country and Western music expanding. Country and Western music expanded dramatically during the 1950s, moving from regional to national popularity. Artists like Hank Williams, Patsy Cline, and Johnny Cash achieved crossover success through recordings, radio, and television. The Grand Ole Opry broadcast nationally, introducing country music to wider audiences. Nashville emerged as recording center while honky-tonk and rockabilly styles influenced rock and roll's development significantly. 78. Jukeboxes at diners. Jukeboxes became central features in 1950s diners, soda fountains, and restaurants, providing music selection and entertainment. These colorful machines, costing 5 or 10 cents per song, featured current hits and classic favorites. Teenagers gathered around jukeboxes selecting music, dancing, and socializing. Individual tabletop selectors in booths allowed customers to control ambience. Jukeboxes represented technological modernity and youth culture's soundtrack simultaneously. 79. Billboard charts forming. Billboard charts formalized during the 1950s, establishing authoritative music rankings based on sales and radio airplay. The Hot 100, launched in 1958, became definitive measure of song popularity. Charts tracked various genres separately, though increasingly recognized crossover hits. Chart positions influenced radio programming, record sales, and artist careers, creating quantifiable success measures that shaped music industry business practices fundamentally. 80. Radio DJs becoming teen idols. Radio disc jockeys became influential teen idols during the 1950s, introducing new music and creating personalities teenagers trusted and admired. DJs like Alan Freed, who coined rock and roll, Wolfman Jack, and local personalities shaped musical tastes through programming choices and enthusiastic presentations. Teenagers tuned in religiously, requesting favorite songs and attending DJ-hosted concerts, making radio personalities cultural gatekeepers and youth culture arbiters. 81. Television dinners in aluminum trays. Television dinners, introduced by Swanson in 1954, revolutionized American eating habits by providing complete frozen meals in compartmentalized aluminum trays. Families could heat dinners in ovens and eat while watching television, eliminating traditional meal preparation. The convenience appealed to busy housewives while representing modern efficiency. Though nutritionally questionable, TV dinners symbolized technological progress, changing family dynamics, and convenience culture, defining the era. 82. Backyard barbecues. Backyard barbecues became quintessential 1950s social activity, with families grilling hamburgers, hot dogs, and steaks outdoors. Suburban homes with yards enabled this leisure activity, combining cooking, eating, and socializing. Fathers typically manned grills, demonstrating masculine outdoor cooking skills. Neighbors gathered for informal parties, children played while adults conversed, and charcoal smoke scented summer evenings. Barbecues represented suburban lifestyle, leisure time, and informal entertaining patterns. 83. Kids playing outside until dark. Children during the 1950s played outdoors from morning until dark with minimal adult supervision, enjoying freedoms later generations wouldn't experience. Neighborhood kids organized baseball games, rode bicycles, climbed trees, and created imaginative adventures. Parents trusted community safety, calling children home when streetlights illuminated. This independence fostered creativity, physical activity, and social skills while reflecting era's relative safety, community cohesion, and different parenting philosophies. 84. Family road trips on Route 66. Route 66 became America's most famous highway during the 1950s, representing freedom, adventure, and westward migration. Families drove from Chicago to Los Angeles through small towns, experiencing roadside attractions, motor courts, and regional culture. The highway symbolized American mobility, opportunity, and exploration. Businesses catering to travelers thrived along the route. Though later superseded by interstates, Route 66 remained a nostalgic symbol of 1950s road trip culture. 85. Home decor. Pastel kitchens. Pastel-colored kitchens defined 1950s home decor, with soft pink, turquoise, mint green, and yellow dominating appliances, countertops, and cabinets. Chrome accents, formica surfaces, and modern styling created cheerful, optimistic spaces, reflecting post-war prosperity. Matching appliances in coordinated colors became desirable. This aesthetic represented modernity, cleanliness, and feminine domesticity, while establishing visual vocabulary associated permanently with the decade's domestic culture and design sensibilities. 86. Popular board games like Monopoly. Board games including Monopoly, Scrabble, and Clue provided family entertainment during 1950s evenings. These games required no electricity, encouraged face-to-face interaction, and offered affordable recreation. Families gathered around tables, playing competitively while conversing and bonding. Games taught children mathematics, vocabulary, strategy, and sportsmanship. The popularity of board games reflected era's emphasis on family togetherness, home-centered entertainment, and simpler pleasures before television dominance. 87. Sunday drives as family outings. Sunday drives became weekly family traditions, with parents driving children through countryside or scenic routes without specific destinations. These leisurely excursions provided entertainment, family bonding, and exposure to surrounding regions. Families admired landscapes, visited small towns, stopped for ice cream, and enjoyed time together. Sunday drives reflected automobile culture, abundant leisure time, cheap gasoline, and emphasis on family activities characterizing 1950s middle-class life. 88. Birthdays with homemade cakes. Birthday celebrations during the 1950s centered on homemade cakes baked by mothers, often elaborately decorated with frosting and candles. Parties featured simple games like pin the tail on the donkey, musical chairs, and passing parcels. Children received modest gifts and celebrated with neighborhood friends. These intimate celebrations emphasized family effort and personal touches rather than commercial entertainment, reflecting era's values about childhood, celebration, and maternal domestic responsibilities and creativity. 89. House parties with vinyl records. House parties during the 1950s featured vinyl records providing entertainment as teenagers and adults socialized, danced, and celebrated. Hosts curated record selections, creating playlists before digital technology. Living room furniture was pushed aside for dancing, refreshments were homemade, and guests mingled casually. These gatherings fostered community, celebrated milestones, and provided entertainment without expensive commercial venues. House parties reflected era's social culture and home-centered leisure activities. 90. Teenagers babysitting as jobs. Teenage babysitting became standard part-time employment during the 1950s, with girls primarily providing childcare for neighborhood families. Babysitters earned 50 cents to $1 hourly, gaining independence and responsibility. Parents trusted teenage neighbors to supervise children during evening outings. This arrangement benefited everyone. Teenagers earned spending money, parents enjoyed affordable childcare, and young people developed maturity and work ethic through responsible employment. 91. Polio vaccine discovery. Jonas Salk. Dr. Jonas Salk developed the polio vaccine, announced in 1955, ending the terrifying disease that had paralyzed thousands of children annually. Mass vaccination campaigns began immediately, with children receiving shots at schools. Salk became national hero, refusing to patent the vaccine, stating it belonged to humanity. The vaccine's success represented medical triumph, eliminated childhood scourge, and demonstrated science's power to conquer disease, generating optimism about medical progress. 92. DNA double helix discovery. 1953. James Watson and Francis Crick discovered DNA's double helix structure in 1953, revolutionizing biology and understanding of heredity. Their model explained how genetic information was stored and replicated, laying foundations for modern genetics, molecular biology, and biotechnology. The discovery, building on Rosalind Franklin's crucial X-ray crystallography work, represented monumental scientific achievement with profound implications for medicine, agriculture, and understanding life itself fundamentally. 93. Nuclear energy as a hopeful technology. Nuclear energy, during the 1950s, represented hopeful technology, promising unlimited clean power, not just weapons. President Eisenhower's Atoms for Peace program promoted peaceful nuclear applications. The first commercial nuclear power plant opened in Pennsylvania in 1957. Futurists predicted nuclear-powered cars, airplanes, and homes. This optimism reflected era's technological confidence, though later concerns about safety, waste, and proliferation tempered enthusiasm significantly. 94. Educational films in schools. Educational films became standard teaching tools in 1950s classrooms, with projectors showing documentaries, instructional content, and government-produced materials covering science, history, health, and safety. Films on topics ranging from dental hygiene to nuclear threats educated students through visual media. Teachers appreciated films as engaging alternatives to lectures. These materials reflected era's embrace of technology in education and visual communication's growing importance in learning. 95. First, organ transplants attempted. The first successful organ transplants occurred during the 1950s, with Dr. Joseph Murray performing the first kidney transplant between identical twins in 1954. This breakthrough demonstrated that replacing diseased organs was medically feasible, though immunosuppression challenges limited applications initially. The achievement represented surgical innovation and opened possibilities for treating previously fatal conditions, establishing foundations for modern transplant medicine, saving countless lives subsequently. 96. Rise of science fairs. Science fairs gained popularity during the 1950s, encouraging students to conduct experiments, build projects, and present findings. Schools organized competitions where students displayed projects ranging from simple demonstrations to sophisticated experiments. Science fairs promoted scientific thinking, hands-on learning, and public communication skills. Cold War competition with Soviets emphasized science education, making fairs important venues for identifying and encouraging young scientific talent essential for national security. 97. Math drills. Inspired by Sputnik fears, Sputnik's launch in 1957 triggered increased emphasis on mathematics education, with schools implementing rigorous math drills to prepare students for scientific careers. Timed arithmetic tests, multiplication tables, memorization, and problem-solving exercises intensified. Educators feared America was falling behind Soviets in technical education. Federal funding supported improved mathematics, curricula, teacher training, and educational materials. These efforts aimed to produce scientifically literate citizens capable of maintaining technological superiority. 98. Weather forecasting improving with radar. Weather forecasting improved dramatically during the 1950s, with radar technology adapted from military applications. Meteorologists tracked storms, precipitation patterns, and severe weather more accurately than previously possible. Television weather reports featured radar imagery, helping viewers understand approaching systems. Improved forecasting enhanced safety by providing advance warning of dangerous weather, supported agriculture through better planning, and demonstrated practical applications of wartime technology for civilian benefit. 99. Antibiotics becoming widely available. Antibiotics, including penicillin, streptomycin, and tetracycline, became widely available during the 1950s, revolutionizing medicine by effectively treating bacterial infections that had previously killed millions. Common infections, pneumonia, tuberculosis, and surgical complications became manageable with antibiotic therapy. Life expectancy increased significantly. Doctors prescribed antibiotics liberally, though overuse concerns emerged later. Antibiotic availability represented medical progress, reduced mortality, and contributed to era's optimism about conquering disease through scientific advancement. 100. Psychology experiments about conformity. Solomon Asch's conformity experiments during the 1950s demonstrated how social pressure influenced individual judgment. Subjects conformed to obviously incorrect group answers about line lengths, revealing powerful conformity pressures. These studies, alongside Stanley Milgram's later obedience research, explored human behavior, authority, and social influence. The experiments reflected Cold War-era concerns about brainwashing, totalitarianism, and individuality, contributing to understanding social psychology and human nature's complexities significantly.